The first empress of the Carly Empire was a great witch. The beautiful milady was named Diana. She put her beloved man on the throne of the emperor, but because of her mistrust of people, the girl offered him a bet. If this love is sincere, then he will be able to find her among the girls with the same face. If the boy finds her within 5 years, then the princess will be able to give up everything, even eternal life and the power of a witch. To become a man and be a married lady for the rest of his days, he must prove his sincerity to the queen. At this time, the only rumors circulating around the city were about how the empress had made a bet with the emperor. They even issued a decree that women who looked like the empress were being sought. People around were gossiping about how the gentleman issued a decree. Even if I don't win, I will choose one girl from the president and make her the empress. This idea sounded really insanely interesting, which is why even strangers were interested in it. One of the girls involved was the main character of this story, who heard about the news in passing and immediately decided to participate in the selection. On the 35th day, the palace gates were closed and the prime minister announced that 108 girls would take part in this bet. The long-awaited moment did not take long to arrive. The servants asked the candidates to wait in the hall. Everything was about to begin soon, although perhaps from the outside, this spectacle looked really scary. All the girls were like Mrs. Diana herself. There were so many identical people in this place, which caused a strange feeling inside. At that moment, the face of that very random contender also changed. At first, the girl did not understand how it was possible to fail to find the mistress among them all. But apparently the queen used a spell so that everyone in the palace would look the same as her. A few seconds later, His Majesty the Emperor himself appeared. Prime Minister Morris was at his side. The official quickly explained that since they would not be able to see all the ladies at once, the girls would be granted an audience with His Majesty, in the order in which they had made their first impression on him. It was a very strange position for the other ladies, because how can one judge by first impressions when everyone around has the same faces? The assistant then explained that the young ladies would be divided into groups of 54 people, and they would be placed in the eastern and western palaces. Those who have already been assigned to a group within a few minutes will be placed in the western palace, and will be dealt with by the audience a little later than those who will go to the eastern palace. At that moment, the heroine realized that it would be more difficult for her to find Mrs. Diana since they were separated like that. Now the fate of Milady seemed to have changed its course. Perhaps the girl would still be able to convince the Mistress of Magic to return to the witch settlement? Among witches, Mrs. Diana was something of an oddball. Most witches do not interact with people and live only in a special place, with the exception of those who left the settlement for practice or research. But the Empress not only fell in love with a human man, but also began to engage in human affairs for his sake. Moreover, for his sake, she, being a witch, even founded a country. And then the great lady magician Diana became famous throughout the entire settlement. Although the people discussed every day how reckless it was to interfere in people's affairs like this, and pitied the lady. There was not a single witch who would not suffer from attachment to a person. Now, another of their sisters would be in tears. Still, there was no denying the fact that Mistress Diana was a great witch. It was crystal clear just by looking at the lady's accomplishments. Only someone as brave as her could have achieved such a feat. At least that was what her colleague thought. The main character of this story really couldn't stop admiring the Countess. She spent whole days worshipping her achievements, all those articles in the newspapers, portraits. The witch was pleased even just to watch the traces that Mrs. Diana left behind. If only the queen hadn't made a bet with this human emperor. This argument had irritated the young sorceress so much that now the girl was determined to stop her. After all, she couldn't allow her mistress to become human. If the emperor can find Lady Diana among the 108 female faces, then he will win his foolish bet and the miss will become a human. And although it was good that Ariana came to the palace and became one of these 108 girls, now she was faced with the main question: how to find Mrs. Diana. One of the guests even noticed the lady's thoughtful face while she was discussing her future plans. At that time, the stranger herself thought that her colleague was worried about the future elections of the emperor. The friendly girl seemed quite nice, so the heroine decided to get acquainted with her. The lady introduced herself as Anna, although it was still unknown whether this was her real name. After all, somewhere here there should still be that very lost Her Majesty the Empress. That day, dear Anna suggested to her new friend that they go for a walk together after their lunch. During the walk, the acquaintance behaved quite openly, telling various details of the palace. For example, if you go in a certain direction, you can reach a place called the Garden of Beautiful Flowers. Based on this, Ariana noticed that this person definitely resembled Mrs. Diana. Elegant behavior, well-oriented in the palace. And then, if this were the real Mrs. Diana, she would also hide behind a pseudonym, although it was still unknown whether the new acquaintance was really so successful. It seemed that the word noblewoman was looking for a catch in each of the girls, while Anna was convinced that Ariana herself was definitely not Her Majesty the Empress. Anya really looks like the queen of the throne. It would even be good if she was chosen. To some extent, the main character of this story even hoped for such a fork in fate. In fact, this girl will definitely not be chosen. She is the younger sister of the knight who accompanies His Majesty. Milady's brother knows her, which means His Majesty already knows her. It's a shame it all turned out this way. On the other hand, if Anna is mistaken for the Empress, it will ruin the whole bet. Perhaps, since there is no one to choose from here, she is some kind of spy? To keep an eye on candidates in the Emperor's absence. But what if she tells her brother that Ariana is not the Empress? Several weeks have passed. During these 15 days, many ladies have not even seen His Majesty's nose. Does this mean that they can relax? Not at all. It's just that their turn for an audience has not yet come. Besides, Anna told me that she met her brother yesterday. The girl talked about that escort night. He was interested in the fact that his sister had a girlfriend. At that moment, the ladies noticed that many other ladies had gathered around the door. As it turned out, Prime Minister Morris had visited their mansion. Without waiting long, the man announced what the girls in the area were most looking forward to. Starting today, they would be honored in turn with His Majesty the Emperor. According to the assistant, each of those in this room will spend some time with His Majesty. He will receive 4 people per day, for an hour, at breakfast, lunch, dinner, and at night. And so on down the list, starting from tonight. After which, Morris asked the ladies to carefully read the list. The young ladies were to come here at the appointed time, and then the escort knight, Sir Charles, would lead everyone. As soon as the male image appeared on the horizon, the main character immediately realized that this man was Anna's brother. He was so handsome that just by looking at her friend's brother, Ariana realized that the real Anna must also be beautiful. But unfortunately, it turned out that the brother hates being called handsome. This was reported by the little sister. For the knight, beauty is a kind of complex. They even fought over it before. The appearance of the escort knight, which represents the entire Huang, is as important as their skills. So every time there is a public event or foreign guests arrive, regardless of their rank and skills, the most handsome knight will always stand in front. So even from the time when the brother was a newbie, the guy already had a lot of work. But there was no time to think about it now. The friends decided to find out the date of the meeting with the prince. As it turned out, they had a difference of only 1 day. Ariana was supposed to see the man at night, and Anna at dinner. As soon as the information was revealed, the friend could not contain her worries. It was not clear why Miss was so upset. If Anya was just a spy, why such a reaction? But if she is not a spy, then she has no other reason to participate in a selection in which she has no chance. After all, if the heroine really wanted to participate so much, then she should have hidden it from her brother. After all, magic is used here. If she had not told her brother anything from the very beginning, he would not have recognized her. At the same time, the girlfriend also suddenly asked her friend a question, asking why Ariana was participating. For example, Katie said that this was a rare experience and she had to come here to have fun. The girl standing behind the lady said that she wanted to finally eat her fill because her family was very poor. They say that the girl with her hair up came because she wanted to become an empress. All these ladies who came here had certain reasons. That is why Anna decided to ask the lady closest to her here why she also wanted to become an empress. The main character, without hiding it, was stunned by this question. Does she really look so vain? The girl, of course, pretends to be Mrs. Diana to confuse the emperor, but even so, she would rather refuse the position of empress. That is why the friend immediately began to explain to her acquaintance that everything is not at all as she thinks. Ari calmly admitted that she had admired Madame Diana for a long time. The empress made her very happy. The girl even said that she was here because she really wanted to meet her idol at least like this. Anna's reaction was quite sweet. She considered such confessions from her friend incredibly brave. Moreover, it looked really romantic from the outside. Ariana herself at that moment also noticed the kindness and responsiveness of her interlocutor, although the girl was a little careless. With all this, the friend also asked the miss if the girl was okay. Anna thought that it would be painful for the guest to see Mrs. Diana, although in reality, everything is a little different. If the mistress becomes a person, that would be painful. But the heroine decided to do everything to prevent it. Then she did not even think about the bad fork in the road. A few hours later, a number of ladies, all identical in appearance, asked Jessie, the first lady from the Western Palace to be granted an audience, how her meeting with His Majesty had gone. Jessie admitted that the man was very kind. She even told him that when she dropped her fan, His Majesty picked it up himself. The other girls instantly noticed how much nobility this man had. On the other hand, he could have simply picked up her fan and said, "Don't be nervous." Listening to all these ladies, the main character was shocked at why people attached so much meaning to picking up a fan. In addition, her friend noticed how Anna immediately became slightly dissatisfied. Ariana still did not pick up people in this house. The next morning, Mistress Ariana woke up from the gentle voice of the maid. Opening her eyes, the girl noticed how many maids came to her personal room. The maids woke the girl up to help Milady change. Today was the day of her audience with the master. Initially, the heroine found it strange that the assistants came early in the morning to help her change clothes, since the date was supposed to take place at night. But the servants were explained that they needed to prepare for the meeting in advance, even though Ari's turn was only in 10 hours. At the same time, the resident of the mansion was glad to finally see the Emperor despite everything. And yet, isn't it too much to prepare all day and not eat anything at all? But as soon as the miss looked in the mirror, her opinion about the preparation changed. The girl looked like a goddess descended from heaven, like Lady Diana herself. Ari, of course, liked her bright clothes in the portraits, but this modest and elegant outfit was too beautiful. Carl met the girl in such a chic form. The bodyguard asked to follow him. As soon as the girl saw the knight, she could not stop thinking about the fact that he was her friend's brother. But even at the same time, Ariana thought about what she would say at the meeting with Her Majesty. Miss understood that she should not pretend that she knew nothing, and she did not need to make it clear that she was definitely not Mrs. Tessa. The girl decided to simply remain silent that day. Several minutes passed, and Carl still continued to lead the lady to the right meeting place. It was so awkward that the young lady even thought that at this rate she would not get there and would die. In addition, the clothes and shoes on her are mortally uncomfortable. To lighten the mood a little, the aristocrat decided to ask what kind of person Lady Diana was. But the knight just ignored her question coldly. Only a few minutes later, he said that he was pleased to hear how the lady was trying to get information about Her Majesty. Since the man avoided answering, the girl also decided to show her character and called him bad. It was immediately obvious how angry the servant was. Perhaps some rudeness to the palace employee was not the best idea. The man immediately asked the miss what she would do if bad rumors about her reached the ears of His Majesty. But the girl calmly responded to the provocation, and they followed further. In a couple of minutes, the guys came to a beautiful place. The Emperor lived here. As soon as His Highness appeared on the horizon, he immediately laughed. Almost all the king laughed at was how Miss Ariana was the first one who decided to confront Sir Carl. Then Emperor Han offered his hand to Madame and suggested that they take a walk together. At that moment, the girl was confused and really didn't understand what the guy's outstretched hand meant. So she just clapped his palm, after which the guy laughed. Then he suggested that they just walk together. The girl herself was still trying to come to her senses after the man's beauty. It was the first time the lady had seen someone so beautiful. Ariana was curious about the kind of man that Mrs. Diana had married. He was indeed very handsome. But sooner or later, his human beauty would disappear. That's why the main character of this story really thought about the decision of the Great Witch. Is it worth giving up her magical power and immortality for a fleeting smile? In 20 years, she will regret it. Wouldn't it be better to embalm him in this state and enjoy his beauty forever? While Ariana was carefully thinking about choosing her idol, she, without noticing, began to openly stare at the Emperor, which the young man noticed. To be honest, this was the first time the guy had seen a candidate stare at him so intently. That's why he decided to ask the girl if she wanted to say anything. Besides, the other candidates always had something to say, so the guy expected questions on absolutely any topic. But what was the man's surprise when the modest girl, at first glance, asked him how he managed to seduce Mrs. Diana? In fact, he obviously didn't have an answer to that question either. Khan really didn't know how it happened, because Diana was the one who started seducing him first. He didn't know why it all happened, but it was true. Although it seemed to the heroine that this simply could not be, the lady was sure that he used his pretty face as a weapon. The girl still did not believe His Majesty, so she continued to ask the Emperor how he seduced the lady of his heart and persistently asked to reveal the secret. Without receiving the answer that Ariana had been waiting for so long, since the man had convinced her that Diana had seduced him first, their date soon came to an end. It was time to go back to their place. The chief guard informed the boys about this. The minutes spent together flew by really quickly. Even when the girl was already leaving for her chambers, the guy decided to ask her again if this was really all the lady wanted to tell him. Despite the fact that you are a human being, you have been given the great honor of being loved by Madame Diana. That was all the lady added at that moment. And then Madame disappeared right out of sight of the great man. Then Carl approached the prince. Time had long since passed. It was crystal clear that it was not easy for the guy to wait so long. In addition, the Emperor noted that earlier he had seen the knight and one of the chosen ones arguing, so the man inquired about the reason for the conflict. At the mere mention of a disagreement, Carl immediately began to deny the fact that they had argued. But the Emperor is not blind. Since it was not an argument, Khan ordered the guy to point out why everything was so bad, while making it clear that he was not blaming his employee for anything. The man had initially seen that candidate Ariana reminded him a lot of Diana when they first started dating. That's why he was so interested in asking the knight about the details of this girl. While Carl thought that there was no point in it, because this girl was impudent. To divert the conversation, His Majesty reminded himself that tomorrow evening it would be Anna's turn. The man assumed that Anya must feel very awkward in the image of Diana. Despite everything, the Emperor's chief assistant was very grateful to his master. Therefore, the knight had to calmly prepare everything. Leaving home, Carl recalled the words of his dear sister. The girl said that her friend was a real beauty. It was about Ariana. In fact, the young man also found this lady quite bright and nice. The next morning, Ari had a conversation with the other chosen ones about His Majesty's behavior. The girls asked each other about various details of their meeting with the young heir to the throne. Most of the ladies assured that the guy was quite good-natured. One of the interlocutors even admitted that she got nervous and made a mistake, and Khan corrected her. At that moment, Ari subconsciously understood perfectly well that she was the only one who had started a spat with His Majesty. But since the girl could not share all the details with the girls, she chose to say that the man was not as kind to her as to others. At the same time, the heroine turned her attention to Jessie. Her friend thought for a few minutes, after which she said out loud how she noticed that Ariana had been with His Majesty longer than the allotted hour yesterday. Of course, Lady Ari knew that the allotted time had already passed, but Miss had no idea that it was of such great importance. Besides, it was strange that her friend was keeping track of someone else's date time. In order not to be separated from the group, the young lady decided to justify herself by saying that she had not noticed how time had passed while talking. At that very moment, one of the candidates started talking about a delicious dinner with His Majesty, and so the girls jumped to another topic of conversation. After tea, Ariana had already come up with her further plans. Anna had been busy preparing for the meeting with the Emperor since the morning, so now was the best time for the heroine to start looking for traces of Lady Diana. Magic leaves its traces where it was used anyway. If you find the places where magic was used, then the beauty will find traces of the witch. Several hours passed. The girl climbed literally every corner of the outer garden of the palace. Looking for traces turned out to be more important than she thought. At that moment, while the girl was hiding in the bushes, the knight Carl approached her from behind. From the side, the girl looked really strange, so the man decided to find out what she was doing there. The problem was that the knight recognized Ari without any problems. The heroine did not even understand how he remembered her so well. Without waiting for an explanation from the lady, the man again began to argue with the candidate. The guy even admitted how glad he was that the lady was not Her Majesty the Empress. Although it had only been a few years since the guard had seen Her Majesty the Empress, it was not surprising that he could easily distinguish the queen from any other girl. Ari then continued the argument by stating that this was the essence of the bet. The girl tried to convey to him her incomprehension of how some Carl could recognize the Empress if even the Emperor himself could not. Such attempts to interfere in something that was not his business irritated the knight even more. It seemed as if the girl had seriously decided to quarrel now. Although the lady herself believed that it was the guard who had started the conflict first, continuing it since yesterday evening, soon the guys had already approached the palace. As soon as the lady with the knight entered the main room of the mansion, Eri decided to say hello, but the man hinted her not to do so, all because the other candidates were just discussing their competitor. The girls thought that Anya really looked very much like Her Majesty the Empress. Jessie shared her opinion with another girl that Anna could very well be pretending, which is why she spends so much time with His Majesty. An hour and a half had already passed, and she still had not returned. While talking, the ladies also noticed that Ariana was late yesterday, but not that long. And there was a rumor that the girlfriends had recently quarreled. Of course, Ari was not happy that the other competitors remembered her, because she did not want it herself. But the lady at that moment thought more about the fact that Anna was still at a meeting with the Emperor. Moreover, the other ladies also noticed her resemblance to Lady Diana. Besides, Diana's main fan noticed that Anya is the same as her brother. For some reason, every time the conversation turns to the Emperor, both he and she have this expression on their faces. And so, the audiences of all the participants of the Western Palace came to an end. The rivals began to seriously worry about their future fate. What will happen now? No one knew this yet, because of which fear enveloped the bewitched young ladies from head to toe even more. If someone is kicked out, does that mean that girl is going home? Who will stay, then the Emperor was able to find her. And who spent the most time with His Majesty? How many questions arose without the possibility of getting an answer? That's how panic began to spread in the palace. Meanwhile, His Majesty was discussing matters with his deputy Morris. The assistant pointed out that it was necessary to take into account how the Empress could have changed. In addition, the servant already wanted to hear his boss's decision. Khan admitted that everything turned out to be more complicated than he had expected. At home, it was really extremely difficult for a man to understand who was who among these 108 beautiful ladies with the same face. His Majesty explained that there were some things that bothered him, but it was hard to figure them out in a casual conversation. Besides, the guy was still unsure of his choice. Based on his statements, the assistant decided to ask if the bet with his wife was too risky. Of course, the deal didn't really guarantee the best outcome. Too many of the participants looked like Diana. Besides, the Emperor didn't understand it all. Who knows? Maybe Diana was deliberately trying to be different from herself, and there is only one attempt. Despite the fact that a man is not limited in time, if he makes the slightest mistake, he will lose his wife. The protagonist himself understood that he had to be careful. At the same time, time was running out. He had to hurry to make a decision. But even if the king expelled Her Majesty the Empress herself, he would still have a man similar to her, as Morris's assistant noted out loud. Now it was worth considering whether there was a better way. In order to help the Emperor, the assistant decided to ask who attracted the young man's attention the most. Then Khan, without thinking twice, remembered that there was a participant who looked the most like Diana, Lola from the Eastern Palace. Morris couldn't help but agree with his boss. This girl had a beautiful gait and impeccable manners. In addition, the servant noticed that she knew her way around the castle very well. Actually, just like Madame Anna from the Western Palace, but it was certainly not her, as the deputy believed, Lola. She was the one who scored the most points among the members of the Eastern Palace and especially attracted attention at first impression. There were even rumors in the Eastern Palace that she was not Lola at all, and she even had followers. But still, there must be a reason why the Emperor did not choose her, and this reason is actually quite simple. Emperor Han considered her too similar, and this made the young man doubt. After all, he knew his wife very well. Who would have acted differently? Diana would really do everything to prevent the man she loved from recognizing her until the very end. Would she really give the guy such an easy choice if she decided to test his sincerity? Definitely not. The Diana Khan knows is not that kind of person. In any case, Lola was so similar that the guy was already starting to get confused. Although Morris was extremely unclear about his boss's doubts, wasn't there something in Mistress Diana that they couldn't imitate? By pointing this out, the man was trying to convey the truth to the boss. Mistress Diana was the only witch of their time who revealed herself. No matter how good the candidates were acting, they couldn't replicate Mrs. Diana as a witch. That's why the assistant suggested giving Countess Lola a simple test, something that would be easy for Mrs. Diana. But if it wasn't her, the girl simply wouldn't be able to pass the test. Within a few minutes, Lola received a special assignment from the master. And although the guard could not explain who the summons came from, it was perfectly clear to all the ladies that it was from His Majesty. Whose other assignment would the knight carry out? Opening the paper, it was written "In the Tower Alone," which meant the meeting place. The girls in the area, who also read the letter for the lady behind his back, were simply delighted. Everyone thought that this was a secret meeting in the tower, just the two of us. The girl's friend, Chris, immediately asked her acquaintance if she was going to go. Although the question was rather stupid, Lola had no choice. At the same time, the other candidate considered the message a little strange. His Majesty, of course, could have called Lola to him through a night, but Milady did not know exactly who had called her. Eavesdropping on their girlfriends, the rivals decided that Chris was simply jealous. What could be dangerous in the list brought by the knight? The girls even began to giggle. After all, they had previously considered Chris to be Lola's best friend. And yet, Lady Lola really had to go to the meeting. And even though her friend had a strange premonition, even if it was sent by His Majesty, this is a very incomprehensible letter. But the girl only said not to worry, because she knew perfectly well what she was doing. At this time, on the other side of the palace, Katie brought new gossip for her rivals. This girl was one of those who came here to become an empress, but to have fun in the Imperial Palace. And as someone who came here just to have fun, she gets along with everyone and also asks for a lot of information. In any case, she is funny. That's why most girls like her as much as the main character of this story. This girl behaves especially funny when it comes to gossip. Well, my lady is not at all like Mrs. Diana. So, the little girl just returned from the Eastern Palace and told about how one of the participants received a secret message from His Majesty himself. The girl conveyed what chaos is currently reigning in the Eastern region. As soon as the candidates heard this, they immediately began to talk among themselves, putting forward quite a few theories. A secret meeting? Alone with His Majesty? Maybe this is not the final decision yet? He just had time to meet someone alone and that's it. The news really raised a ruckus in the mansion. In fact, at that moment, the witch's admirer did not like it at all. The man had been given a 5-year sentence, and he had already found her, which meant that the Emperor had won. And Lady Diana would now truly become a human. Such a change in the chronology was clearly not part of Ari's plans. Besides, at that moment, the girl noticed her friend's strange behavior. Anna was clawing at her dress so much, as if she was ready to tear it into small pieces. Although the lady herself said that she was slightly uncomfortable here, indicating that everything was fine. In the end, Anya went to her room. As soon as her friend moved away, the heroine decided to find out more details about the news. The first thing the lady decided to ask was the name of the participant. Katie immediately said that it was Lola, a girl who had really succeeded here. Then the gossip shared that the secret meeting of the young people would take place in the tower, in a separate annex to the castle. The location of the secret meeting seemed strange to Ariana. The girl thought to make sure that she was Mrs. Diana before Lola and His Majesty met. With all this, the fan of the missing girl understood perfectly well that if it was really Diana, then Ari would simply start to hate himself. In any case, the guest came here to interfere with the idol. She is a witch, like the mistress, which means that she will most likely not be exposed. Meanwhile, the young girl was already preparing for a secret meeting. Lola was so happy that she managed to find the perfume that Madame Diana uses. The lady has always just watched His Majesty from a distance, but now she has the chance to become the Empress herself. Who wouldn't be happy about such a phenomenal opportunity? The young lady even used the perfume of the arguing miss just to completely capture the Emperor's heart. Her plan was simply doomed to success. It was time to move to that very place. As soon as the lady reached the secret room, the door was immediately locked without the slightest attempt to open. And although Lola was bored and prayed to be let out of here, no one was going to do it. That night, my lady was doomed to remain in the enchanted tower. Meanwhile, Ariana seemed to be going crazy, wondering whether she should go see Lola. Although the girl was nervous, she was not as red and rosy as Anna. The heroine even thought that her friend was sick. In addition, during the meal, the chosen one was also rather absent-minded. Now, Ariana, as a true friend, was seriously worried about Anna's condition. both moral and physical. And seeing this sad face, like Mrs. Diana's, even the lady's heart begins to ache. But even so, Mrs. Diana's face is heaven on earth. The heroine then decided to admit that she had been thinking all the time about whether she should go and check whether the participant was really Ms. Diana. She specially shared her worries with Miss Anna in order to calm and support the girl a little. Although then the closest person to Ari in this palace noted that her friend told her that she came to find the Empress. Anna guessed that the interlocutor could also be sad that everything was coming to an end. But although the lady herself admitted that she was not particularly sad, the last phrase seemed to finish off the aristocrat, causing the girl to burst into tears. She started crying so unexpectedly that she really scared Ari. Then the lady apologized for her display of emotions, after which the girls went together to the ladies' room because one of them needed to blow her nose. Walking through the palace, Anna could not restrain her assumptions about the secret meeting. The young lady pointed out that Lola had probably already met His Majesty. His Majesty was probably carefully studying Lola, holding her hand and smiling because he had found her and their lips would soon merge. Anna continued to speak out, trying in every way to prove that this was the happiest moment in the aristocrat's life. If only the lady knew the real truth and what was actually happening at that moment with the poor candidate's body. It seemed as if Lola had already been chosen as Empress. Lately, the girls began to notice that nothing had happened in these 3 days. In addition, my friends noticed something odd. At certain times, the dining room was always full, but lately it has been almost empty, and I would like to understand why. Then one of the girls told Ariana that Lola had not left the tower for 3 days, and all the residents were leaving to watch this picture. The girls were doing this on purpose. They were not interested in Lola herself, but in the appearance of His Majesty. That same day, a frightened Katie ran into the Eastern Castle to tell the bad news. Lola was dead. All the ladies gathered outside, frightened, trying to understand what had really happened. There were so many people that nothing could be clearly seen. It seemed that all the participants had gathered there. In the crowd, the main character only spotted one unfortunate lady. The young miss was crying. She was the first participant to discover the candidate's body. The other competitors even began to assume that this lady could have been Lola's killer. Who knows? Maybe she killed her, and now she's behaving like this. And yet, why would she have come here then? Only Morris looked at the dead young lady with complete cold blood. The man asked the servants to remove the body immediately. After all, the original plan was only to lock Lola in the tower. The real Mrs. Diana would have been able to break the locked door or just fly down. Because the real chosen one of the Emperor is not only a witch, but also a war heroine. And she would not have died so pitifully. Based on the condition of the girl's body, the deputy lord of the castle assumed that she died shortly after she was locked in the dark part of the palace. The pathologist also confirmed this. The lady most likely died at dawn 3 days ago. But the doctor never found the murder weapon. However, looking only at the participant's neck, everything became clear. At this place, the throat seemed to be divided into 2 parts. Then Morris guessed everything perfectly. His assumption was valid. There was a very real chance that one of the participants was the criminal. That's why the assistant decided to tell the boss about it. The lady was strangled from behind, and there were no signs of a physical struggle, only a suffocation mark. They were close to each other. It could also be suggested that the accomplice was in a confidential relationship with Miss, and yet nothing could be changed. And Lola was not Diana anyway. The girl had only prepared herself rather delicately to resemble the Empress. Although Khan still felt very sorry for the candidate, she was too beautiful a girl to die. The strangest thing was that the criminal killed the lady right in her room. Moreover, she killed her just a few hours after entering the tower. Why make an attempt on the life of a contestant who was most likely Diana? If she had been the Empress, the outcome would have been the opposite. There was only one logical option. She was sure it was not the Countess. This outcome complicated things even more. An innocent pretender was killed for no reason. At that moment, Morris noticed that the competition between the participants was even more fierce than they had expected. There were 107 people here, all of different status, character, and they all had different pasts. It would be more strange to expect that there would not be a single bad person among them. And there is nothing strange in the fact that the criminal is hiding. But later on, this complicates everything. It turns out that even if the emperor doubts, he himself will not be able to do anything. But the assistant then, after the man expressed his worries, dispelled his doubts. This is not at all true. In fact, now the head of the kingdom has an exact way to figure out Her Majesty the Empress. And everything will become much easier than it was initially. At least that's what the Prime Minister thought. All that is needed is to simply allow the participants to compete with each other without any restrictions. The Deputy Chief suggested that from now on, His Majesty will not choose anyone. Let all the candidates for the chosen one as the Emperor's spouse compete for the man themselves. Then they will allow the girls to use any tactics, any weapons. Morris and Khan will allow them to kill and hunt each other. Besides, the assistant did not see anything cruel in such a decision. Whatever it was, the participants themselves started it. It's such a small war. Since she herself does not want to give herself away, the Emperor and his servants will make it so that she will have to reveal her identity, no matter how the real mistress tries to hide among 107 rivals. The last survivor can only be a war heroine, which means she will be the real Mrs. Diana. Therefore, this decision was quite interesting and logical in Morris's opinion. Meanwhile, the main character of this story was lying in her chambers, slightly glad that Lola was not Mrs. Diana. But still, the lady could not stop thinking about who killed this girl. The noblewoman could not even imagine that one could be so envious of another participant. Ariana could not just throw the death of a person out of her head. Another participant came into the ladies' room next. It was Anya. Pani said that the knight was calling all the participants, so she suggested that her friend go with him. It was obvious that something was about to happen. They had called all the participants, which meant they were going to announce something. Ari also noticed that there was a girl in a wheelchair among the candidates. What were they going to say that they would even call a disabled person here? Just a few minutes later, Morris made an announcement to everyone. A decision had been made to try a new selection method. But before that, Mr. Prime Minister thought to inform the ladies that His Majesty had never invited Lady Lola to the tower. Also, one of the greatest employees explained that the Countess had been murdered, after which he reminded the contenders that the criminal was now among them. The man added that he also did not know why the killer chose evil. The young man had merely suggested that perhaps Lady Lola looked too suitable for the role of Empress, and as much as he would have liked, it did not save her from danger. In any case, Morris came up with the idea of saying that after yesterday's incident, it was His Majesty who had come up with a more reliable and practical way to determine who Her Majesty the Empress was. It was not clear why the Emperor's assistant had veiled it in such a way. After the changes were made, the candidates immediately began to whisper, "You and the selection method? And what about the criminal?" the ladies asked each other. Then the minister announced that due to the fact that in the past Her Majesty the Empress was a great war heroine, a small war would also be organized between the candidates. The rules of this duel are quite simple. The action takes place in the Imperial Palace and there are no other restrictions. The task of each of the 107 remaining girls is to kill the other participants and try to survive. As terribly cruel as it sounded, the girls were forced to believe that Morris was not joking. Then the man explained that, of course, he was not saying that everyone should die. After all, that would be disadvantageous for the dispute between the Emperor and Empress. The ladies will have to fight until His Majesty determines Her Majesty the Empress. More precisely, until it will be impossible to say with certainty that one of the ladies is her absolute Empress. Thus, all that the young lady will have to do is point to a candidate who will be chosen by the Emperor. The bet will be over once it is revealed who exactly is the Empress. In simple terms, there will be a competition for life between the ladies. Her Majesty the Empress will survive this war in any case, and she will definitely stand out the most in it. If the Lord and the Prime Minister quickly find the Empress, then many will be able to survive. But if the search drags on, then it will continue until only one of the ladies remains. Morris, to be fair, also added that if one of the candidates is unsure of herself, she can refuse. In this case, those who refuse will remain in the palace but will be in a specially prepared place until the end of the competition. But this whole proposal sounded really incomprehensibly strange. What was the point of all this? Ariana still didn't understand. To do everything so that Mrs. Diana had no choice but to give herself away? A very illogical and incomprehensible solution even for such a dispute. Being a great witch, and immortal at that, it still doesn't pose a danger to Lady Diana, and therefore there's nothing to worry about. The girl assumed that was the only reason the Emperor came up with such a strange plan. If your life is at stake, no matter what power you hide, you will try to stay alive. Right now, Ariana herself does not know who Lady Diana is, so how can the participant hide her from the Emperor? She will not get an answer to this question so quickly. Other people were also outraged by the decision of the higher powers. A lady from the crowd shouted that it was complete nonsense to kill people you had made friends with. The girl decided not to give up her rights, but she did not want to allow a war either. Most of the candidates agreed with her. In fact, it all really looked like coercion. Most of them are trying to prevent the war, but only a few people are seriously thinking about it. Even if most of the candidates for the role of the Emperor's wife refuse now, there will be those who will take part. And there will definitely be those who will take a particularly active part in all of this. After all, the ladies can be simply crazy about the idea of becoming a new empress. What came out of the Prime Minister's words was that the war could have been avoided if no one had gotten involved. But is that really possible? Considering what everyone here knows, among the 107 girls is the killer who killed Miss Lola. After the meeting, Anna and Ariana were talking about the innovation. Her friend admitted that she was worried because even if one person decided to take part in it, in the end everyone would refuse to be drawn in. Although Ariana, in turn, believed that this was the Emperor's original idea, Anna seemed to sense that this was most likely Mr. Morris's plan. Indeed, he was the only one who could have come up with something so vile and disgusting. And yet, as terrible as this plan was, it was actually effective. Most likely, the Emperor was reluctant to approve of this proposal, but somehow he agreed, accepting the Prime Minister's logical choice. Just looking at Ari, it was clear how worried she was. That's why her friend decided to calm her acquaintance down. At least Anna has an older brother, a very strong knight. That's why the lady could ask him to help the girls. And then both ladies would be safe. And although Miss refused help, her close friend really was not going to let anyone harm her friend. Although saying such bold words, the girl herself was trembling with fear. At that moment, Ariana realized that she, too, had to protect the closest person to her in this place. Behind her girlfriends walked another candidate, Jessie. The girl was also thinking about her next plan of events. If she left the palace right now, the only thing that awaited her was a pile of debts and prison. After all, the young lady had long ago set herself the goal of becoming Empress at any cost. The real Mrs. Diana is a witch. Therefore, the girl understood that she had no chance to stand against the witch. But the contenders were also told that it was not necessary to kill everyone. Even if Jessie simply had fewer rivals, her chances of becoming Empress would increase significantly. The girl knew from the very beginning that all the weaklings would, of course, abstain out of fear. Then she would have to avoid the real Mrs. Diana, but those who had won His Majesty's trust would have to be removed. And at that moment, the lady was just talking about such ladies as Anna and Ariana. Everyone said that there would be no war, but a fan of Diana, a young witch, decided to create special magic, just in case for her own safety. Thanks to this, the girl would always know who was entering her room. And then the noblewoman decided to go and cast magic on the door to her friend's room. Approaching her friend's room, Ariana noticed that a knight was standing in front of the estate. Even then, the young lady noticed how Sir Carl was worried about Anya. Ari was truly glad that her brother was not the head of the knights. At least now the heroine did not need to interfere. Hello. The girl couldn't stop thinking about the fact that her friend was also worried about her and trying to protect her. It was very sweet of her boyfriend. In fact, deep down, Ariana really wanted Anya not to be Mrs. Diana. As she was leaving for her room, the girl heard someone walking right behind her. It was obvious that someone was targeting the candidate, although they said there would be no war. Ariana wondered who this participant was who had changed her mind. But the girl knew that she had to stand up for herself. Therefore, unnoticed, as if squatting down to smell a flower, the girl grabbed the stone in her hand for self-defense. But as soon as the heroine turned around, she saw that the same knight was in front of her. Carl instantly reminded the lady that the girl was in danger. In addition, the man with deft movements of his hand grabbed Ari's hand that was holding the stone. The princess tried to break free from the strong man's hands, but, of course, she managed to do so with difficulty. Despite all this, the beauty was surprised why the sire was pursuing her. Although the soldier had previously assured his interlocutor that he would not attack anyone without a weapon. Everything turned out to be much simpler. It was Anna who asked her brother to follow her friend so that the girl would be safe. After everything was explained, Carl asked the resident of the palace to put the stone back. At the same time, the expression on the guard's face was not very optimistic at this moment. The guest did not even understand why she saw such contempt on his part every time the candidate was not going to throw the stone directly at the guy. It's as if he simply hates his sister's friend. After all, Anya herself asked him, so he didn't really have a choice. But still, the chosen one decided to go home herself, without the supervision of extra eyes. The modest woman thanked the bodyguard for his help, but explained that she was strong enough, so it would be good if the man did not do this next time. The madam explained that such human behavior irritated her a little, and that night she went to her room herself. The next day, there was another argument between the participants over a broken plate. Everyone was tense, even if they were trying to pretend that everything was fine. It was definitely not the most pleasant and good atmosphere. Ariana, in turn, tried to pretend that she was nervous, like everyone else, but it seemed she overdid it. During lunch, the young lady decided to switch gears and tell her friend that the aristocrat's brother had been looking after her yesterday. Anna explained that her brother was an excellent swordsman, and there was no doubt about him. But at that time, her friend was just thinking about how closely the other participants were watching the girls. For some reason, the participants were looking so attentively as if they thought that the ladies opposite would attack them in pairs. At that very moment, the heroine felt an unpleasant burning sensation somewhere in her chest. This sensation meant only one thing. Someone had broken into Arena's room. The young lady immediately got up from under the dining table, apologized to her friend, and immediately went to reconnoiter her chambers. Approaching the bedroom, Miss noticed that the magic on the door had not dissipated, which meant that it was not Mrs. Diana who had broken in. A second later, the mistress of the room had mentally prepared herself and took the first step towards the bed. "Come out!" the lady immediately ordered in a confident voice. A moment later, Jessie jumped out from under the corner with a sharp blade. "Sorry, but I have to kill you, Ariana," the girl said, heading straight for the image of the young lady. Since the witch was prepared for such an attack, the girl skillfully tripped her, causing the killer to fall to the floor a second later. How much Ari was angry that Jessie chose her. For some reason, everyone is trying to anger Miss. However, there was no time to think about the unfairness of life for long. Ariana had to decide how to act now. First, the girl stunned her rival, so maybe now she should lock her somewhere and sort it out at night. Then the main character of this story chose the option to hide the girl. She lightly pulled the lady by the hand, dragging the beauty with the face of an empress along the floor of her room. A few minutes later, Ariana returned for lunch with her friend. In order not to tell the whole truth, the girl was forced to say that she was in a hurry to go to the toilet. At that time, Ariana thought that this was a great chance to ask Anya if her sister could ask Sir Carl to strengthen the security. Anna was pleased for such concern, but at the same time, the young lady made it clear that if the knights were always on duty, then the other participants would also easily deal with them. It was logical, so all she had to do was put up with the troubles. Okay, it had already happened. And well, the character was glad that Jessie had attacked her first, and not her close friend. That night, Ariana decided to finally figure out how to silence Jessie. She had a brilliant idea to use invisibility magic. After that, the young lady could be abandoned somewhere in the garden where the lady immediately went. It so happened that when Ariana was leaving her room, dragging the invisible body of another aristocrat across the floor, the girl accidentally met a couple of the contestants. The contenders were surprised that their neighbor was going for a walk alone at such a late hour, so they offered to go with them. But the palace resident explained that everything was fine, lied, saying that she was just going to get some fresh air and then come back, and went on her way. How good it was that because of the magic of invisibility, no one except the young witch saw the maniac. After Ari had used the magic she needed, the inexperienced sorceress was now convinced that Jessie would wake up in time. The chosen one understood that she did not need the girls to worry about trifles. That night, she left the miss who had attacked her near a tree in the garden. The next morning, the heroine woke up from strange sounds outside. People were talking so loudly that Ariana decided to look out of her room to see what was going on. As soon as the girl looked into the corridor, she noticed her friend, who was showing Ariana in every way to come to their company. As soon as the girl approached the guys, she heard them discussing the previous night. The candidates immediately began asking Ari if she had seen any suspicious person while she was walking yesterday. The girls reported that Jessie had been found dead, This was extremely strange because the heroine could not have hit her so hard. Later, it became clear that the candidate for the Emperor's wife had been stabbed. After talking with the ladies, Carl decided to talk to the assistant guard alone. The man admitted that one of the participants, who came out in a nightgown, seemed strange to him. Somewhere on a subconscious level, the palace's chief knight felt that something was wrong. He noticed that the lady was not interested in the incident itself, but in how Jesse died. Meanwhile, after the same conversation, the main character of this story seriously thought about who killed Jesse. The young lady even thought about using surveillance magic to find out this question that was tormenting her so much at the moment. But unfortunately, the lady couldn't quite afford it. What if Madame Diana found traces of the witch's magic? Then what? Using magic on the door was also dangerous. But still, if Ariana used it in the garden, the Empress would definitely notice her. Now the girl did not know whether Lady Diana wanted to stay with the Emperor. But at the same time, the aristocrat assumed that the mistress of the palace would probably be upset if she found out that one of the candidates had come to stop her. What should she do now? How difficult it is to make the right decision so as not to harm others and not to ruin her reputation even more. In this difficult moment of reflection, the Emperor himself suddenly appeared on the horizon. He jumped out from under the bushes, slightly frightening the girl. In this role, the king even looked like a fairy, so the girl was not afraid of him at all. The first question from the guy was whether the candidate for his wife was afraid of the whole situation with this war, and not the first murder. Then the lady pointed out that the guy, on the contrary, encourages such a fight, knowing that it is scary. He really looked from the outside like a handsome psychopath. The man himself believed that such actions contradicted the real Diana. And for the one who is not an empress, one can only say one thing. The greater the risk, the greater the gain. And in this situation, the best gain is His Majesty Khan himself. But Ariana didn't seem to be eager to receive such a prize. And although the guy pointed out that the Empress's place was the best gift, the girl didn't see anything good in it at all. In any case, only one person will take this position. Many are at risk because of this. Listening to such convictions of the beauty, the Emperor immediately realized that in front of him was the same participant who asked him how the man seduced Diana. The king even remembered the girl by name. He was so surprised by the young lady. Although this question did not offend him at all, rather it shocked him a little. And although the girl considered her reasoning rather aggressive, Khan thought otherwise. Such a question seemed quite nice to the young man. In short, he had long been accustomed to this. Although Ariana still decided to ask His Majesty whether he had taken the girl for the real Mrs. Diana after that conversation. With this question, the heroine seemed to have gone the wrong way. It so happened that at the moment the madam admitted that she had not come to participate in order to be taken for Mrs. Diana. This answer seemed quite interesting to the man, but only if this girl was that very lady. In a second, the contestant became embarrassed. Her cheeks flushed red. Ariana immediately began to deny all assumptions. How could a girl be as beautiful, as refined, and simply perfect as Mrs. Diana? The noblewoman knew that she shouldn't have denied it so openly, but she was very embarrassed because she had to prevent the Emperor from winning this bet. The situation really became even stranger. But the Emperor even laughed at this outcome of events. Then the man again suggested that the real Diana was standing before him. If the pretender had only wanted to portray the Empress, then shouldn't she have done so more persistently? Ariana did not back down and stated that if she wanted to portray Mrs. Diana, she would have stayed where she was when the man approached her. Now the girl took a couple of steps back. Then the girl decided to ask again how His Majesty had seduced his daughter-in-law. The guy, without thinking twice, decided to say not with words, but to show with direct actions. In a second, he pressed the girl to himself, gently embracing the line of her waist with his hand. At that moment, everything around seemed to freeze. Ariana drowned in the prince's blue eyes, like the lake itself. The situation was quite intimate, and right at that moment, another participant accidentally stumbled upon the couple. Ariana felt so awkward that she instantly pushed the guy's body away from herself, turned around, and ran towards the palace. The girl was so embarrassed that the whole situation irritated her incredibly. Besides, it was unclear who the girl was that was watching them. It was as if there was some kind of setup. It was no wonder that things happening here were so confusing for the umpteenth time. But even if the events were confusing, were they as confusing as the atmosphere in the Western Palace? The surveillance was so intense that it was as if the girls were not allowed to breathe. Anna just sneezed, and 5 people were already looking at her. And Ariana picked up a fallen bear, and they immediately began to treat her like a thief. And how could Ariana now secretly find the real Mrs. Diana in this atmosphere of complete bloodshed was completely unclear. And although the heroine had her own search plan, now further actions changed almost every second. That same day, Katie was playing the role of mentor. She told the other girls to pull themselves together. Although, to be honest, her rivals didn't think that such a speech would help the other candidates. The girl tried to get across to the boys that there were 107 of them left. Were they really just going to sit on their butts and tremble with fear because of one killer? Although, in fact, 2 died. So, there were only 105 girls left. Watching this from the side, Ariana did not even think of interfering in Lady Katie's choice. Well, imagine the girl's surprise when her friend also joined her rival and agreed that they should do something before it was too late. Otherwise, the girl believed that they would simply kill each other. Ariana really didn't expect Anya to speak out. For some reason, her friend was sure that she, like Ariana, didn't want to attract unnecessary attention to herself. However, after the girl's statement, the other ladies immediately began to agree one by one. One of the participants even suggested uniting, refusing to live in constant fear. The chosen ones decided to figure out the killer themselves and finish the job. But what a hassle it was. Who would have known that the girls would have to sit in one big circle and tell their alibis in turn? Katie suggested that each one tell what she did last night. Nancy was the first to speak. She was sleeping. The girl also added that she usually does not leave her room after sunset. Montana joined in. She was in her bedroom reading a book. Ariana admitted that when Jessie was still alive, she walked in the garden. And around the time of the young lady's death, Ari was sleeping in her room. As soon as the heroine said this, everyone around her started whispering, "Walking? Alone? At the time of Jessie's death? And was Jessie really alive then? Why did she decide to take a walk at that time? Alone?" It was as if Ariana knew that everything would turn out like this. It's not hard for her to tell the truth, but if they start clinging to words, it will be very troublesome. At that moment, Claire, the same girl who, along with her friend Anjali, saw the lady that night, came to Ari's defense. The participant explained that Ariana was definitely not the killer, since she left the room empty-handed and returned empty-handed. Well then, someone from the crowd shouted that Jessie had been killed with a knife, and it wasn't hard to hide that weapon. Claire quickly explained that a knife could be hidden, but blood couldn't. The girl noticed that Ari had nothing in her hands, and her clothes were clean. Moreover, the girl returned very quickly. The arguments were accepted, and then another young lady began to tell her alibi. So everyone had already spoken, but there were no leads. Although it was clear what kind of killer would say that he was a killer. Then one girl from the crowd remembered another contender, a noblewoman named Agatha. This lady never left her room after the change in conditions, and the contestant is not with them now. That is, she does not have a published alibi. Agatha's room is on the 1st floor. She could easily sneak out through the terrace, so the other candidates were suspicious of this girl. As soon as the interlocutors seriously thought about it, they decided to follow her to her chambers. At least most of the girls stayed in the lobby. That's why Ariana decided to sit, since she didn't want to become a participant in any unnecessary fuss. That same day, while no one saw it, the night Carl was watching the whole crowd of girls from the sidelines. Why was the man here? It was all very clear, he just couldn't get Ari's answer out of his head for some reason. Carl noticed that the lady wasn't even surprised that Jessie was in danger. The man saw how the girl didn't understand how another contestant died. It seemed not so much strange as suspicious to him. Now the knight seriously thought about the fact that Ariana could be the killer. At least she was definitely somehow connected to this case, which the Sir knew. Well, at the same time, the warrior understood that he simply could not interrogate the candidate for the post of Empress. As he passed the Prime Minister, Carl was so deep in thought that he didn't even notice he was called. Morris was curious to find out what the guy was thinking about, as that often happens with the knight. After a short wait, the young man admitted that he had been thinking about the recent murder of the participant. The young man admitted that there were several things that were bothering him. The Prime Minister had also heard about the incident. That's why he decided to ask the guard how things were going and whether the killer had been found. But the words about the guy being worried didn't please the Emperor's chief assistant a little. Before speaking, Morris asked the sir not to be offended by what the man was about to say. It was clear that the conversation would go on about the extreme curiosity of the palace bodyguard. The man admitted that he did not understand why Carl was investigating a situation that His Imperial Majesty had given his approval for. The deputy wanted to remind him that His Imperial Majesty had given them permission to kill, so even if the guard found the killer, he would have nothing else to do. Moreover, the Prime Minister asked not to take everything so personally. The war between the participants was approved, indeed unleashed by His Imperial Majesty, Morris said, after which the assistant pressed the guy's sore spot even more, asking Carl if the guard was really going to arrest the woman who had carried out the will of the Emperor himself. Although she hadn't even broken the law, if you think about it. Morris understood that he was dealing with a fairly honest man, but at the same time advised the knight not to waste time. To distract the young man a little, to keep him busy, Morris decided to order the knight to take special books to his private office. At that moment, Carl felt humiliated by the injustice. The guy even thought about quitting. Meanwhile, Ariana learned from her friend that Agatha was going to be locked in a room. In fact, the participants cannot afford such behavior at all. But the rivals insistently decided that they would now take turns guarding the door. At least some share of humanity remains in these houses, thanks to the fact that everyone takes turns bringing food to the lady. Ariana herself began to seriously worry whether all this would come back to haunt the ladies in the future. But Anna convinced her that it was unlikely that anything would happen to them. The girls were given carte blanche to kill. Well, they locked her in her own room. Nothing special, it would seem. Although looking only at Anna, it was clear how sad the ladies looked. At that very moment, Anna's brother joined the girls' conversation. The young man explained that he and his sister needed to talk. Something strange was going on here, and that was why Carl was going to discuss something with his own family member. The knight immediately began with his main idea. He advised the girl, if she finds herself in danger, it is better to kill, but not to dare to die. Ariana wanted to leave them alone together, but raised that it was better not to do this, because it was interesting to listen to such a conversation. At the same time, the warrior explained that it seemed the Chancellor was going to hush up the investigation into the participants' murder. This meant that more blood would soon be spilled. If it really came down to it, Carl advised his sister not to try to act like an innocent lamb. The girl absolutely had to survive. After listening to their conversation, Ariana, who was sitting next to him, decided to intervene in her brother's moralizing. The noblewoman did not like the fact that the guy was advising his sister to become a murderer. The young man was still confident in his words and recommendations. When life is at stake, all means are good. The guy also decided to ask the lady in response whether she would have acted differently. To the guy's surprise, Ariana agreed. The girl wanted to prove with all her might that she would not have stooped to such a humiliating level. Ari admitted that she was especially hurt by the knight's suggestion that his sister not defend herself, but simply kill everyone and be done with it. Although the heroine really seemed to be picking on the warrior's words, the girl could be understood. Until Carl arrived, she and her friend had a pleasant time. The argument was gaining momentum, so Anna decided to calm the guys down. But the guy and the girl seemed not to be listening to the other girl at all. They were arguing like little children. A second later, the enemies were finally able to calm down. Unfortunately, they heard a loud scream somewhere in the castle. The boys immediately ran towards the screams. A whole crowd of girls gathered around the room of one of the contenders. When the crowd dispersed, the heroes saw another lady's corpse. Someone had killed Agatha. Her neck was bleeding, and the bed was already beginning to be saturated with the smell of a dead body. The sight was not the most pleasant. The chief knight of the Eastern Castle decided to take matters into his own hands, and in order to calm the girls down, asked everyone to go to their rooms. He also introduced himself by his name, Captain of the Guard, after which he ordered them not to touch anything and leave the scene of the crime. Ariana and Anna were among the first to leave. As soon as the girls left the strangers' chambers, they began to reason out loud about who could have taken the life of Miss. It was unclear. Poor Agatha was locked there. Perhaps she had committed suicide. Before she had gone far from the room, the lady heard more screams. This time, the participants began to fight each other. In addition, they began to attack Carl. Therefore, Anna and Ari had to help rid the guy of the attacking ladies. That time, Carl and his sister Anna suffered slightly at the hands of the bloodthirsty ladies, but everything was relatively good. The couple only received a few abrasions and bruises. Ariana really helped the guys, especially the young man. Although the girl herself slightly ridiculed the fact that, like a strong knight, and he was so tossed around by girls. Well, the knight could be understood since the guy couldn't fight back against women. Besides, the guy openly showed that he was not pleased with the fact that some other contender for the role of the Emperor's bride was sticking her nose into other people's business and asking why the knight couldn't deal with women. However, it sounded from his lips as if knights were whipping boys, as if that was exactly what was written in the warrior code, as it seemed to Ariana. Such sarcastic convictions of the miss angered the man even more, but the guy controlled himself as best he could. After all, he understood that he should not talk to a lady he didn't like, so as not to get irritated. At this time, Ariana carefully examined the wounds on her friend's face. The black eye hurt quite a bit. Ari felt sorry for her friend because she was too kind. And although the beatings looked serious, now it would be possible to somehow distinguish the participants. Many had abrasions after the fight. At the same time, the friend pointed out to the lady that if nothing was done, a scar might remain. Therefore, Ariana decided to go to the infirmary and bring a special ointment for Anna. The girl also promised to bring medicine for the night, but only if there was something extra lying around in the pharmacy. While the girl was slowly disappearing from sight, heading to the palace, Carol decided to ask his sister again if she had to befriend such an exceptional person. It was obvious that Carl did not like this young lady at all, not to mention Anna herself. It was as if his friend doted on her closest person in this place. Anna even tried to explain to her brother that he simply didn't know her well, proving that Ariana was very sweet and naive. Although the man himself suggested that the youngest find a better friend here, the chief knight of the palace really believed that his sister was too trusting. He just didn't understand how one could live by such beliefs. Besides, in his head, everything somehow didn't add up, and it wasn't really about Ariana being the real Mrs. Diana. Meanwhile, the heroine had already arrived at the pharmacy for the medicine she needed. As soon as she entered the room, she noticed many ladies around. Everyone who had gotten into the fight was there. The girl was also met by a palace employee who immediately decided to find out if Ariana had been hit in the fight. Then the heroine explained that she had not participated in the fight, but her friend had been injured, although this girl was not here now. Then the lady asked for a healing ointment for 2 people. But unfortunately, the pharmacist said that the medicine had just run out. Ariana explained that the medicine was not urgently needed, since the beatings were not fatal, but there were scratches from nails on her face and a large bruise under her eye. Her friend admitted that she was afraid that if nothing was done, a scar might remain. The medicines were indeed gone, but the doctor suggested an alternative, suggesting to do the following. Ariana could go to the main infirmary of the palace and bring the medicines here, if it would not be difficult for her, of course. Besides, the medicines are not very heavy. Of course, the lady agreed to such a tempting offer. But first of all, the lady decided to ask if she could really go outside the building, since this had not been mentioned anywhere before. The pharmacist handed the guest a special piece of paper. The manager asked her to tell the guards her name and promised to notify the guards in advance that Ariana would be arriving on her behalf. If she left the estate for a short time, nothing terrible would happen to the lady. And in general, to tell the truth, Ariana was only glad to feel free for a second. Getting to the main infirmary, the heroine thought about the latest events. Of the 108, 3 participants had already died. Carl said that the fight began because of Agatha's death. When everything was discovered, the girls who were against isolating their rival began to blame the others for what happened. They said that by locking Agatha in the room, the others had sentenced an inconspicuous person to death. The girls who had decided to lock Agatha, on the contrary, were trying to prove that all this was the work of a new killer. Would anyone be brave enough to look for Jesse and Agatha's killer? Somehow, Ariana didn't believe it at all. At the same time, the young witch knew that if the murders continued, then anyone who dared to say a word would immediately find themselves in the center of everyone's attention. If no one gathered to look for the killer, then he would understand that his hands were untied, and the girls who don't want to kill will try to hide. In the end, only the strongest will survive. At that moment, the girl was distracted from her thoughts by a familiar voice. Ariana accidentally met the Emperor. The first thing the guy decided to do was to ask why the participant of the event was in the central palace. Then the lady tried to explain that she had come here on request, telling him that they needed medicine. At that moment, the man became worried that one of the chosen ones might be injured. In addition, he noticed the paleness on the lady's face. Even at such a moment, Ariana managed to joke. This time, the girl confirmed her pale skin, but regarding the others, the resident of the Eastern Palace pointed out the opposite. The participants literally turned blue from the beatings. Overall, Ariana felt a certain irony at that moment. In her opinion, it was strange that the culprit of this crazy, inhuman competition was putting on such a kind face. In addition, the guy considered the meeting with the lady a success and suggested taking a short walk. This hurt the girl even more since she expected at least a question about the wounded. What was even stranger was that the Emperor recognized Ari again, and even remembered the name of one of the 108 participants. The guy reaffirmed his words about the girl in front of him being special, and even offered to go together to the medical center, holding out his hand to the girl. The lady herself at that moment was thinking more about how she managed to be remembered by the man. Maybe she had some specific habit. What if Mrs. Diana also noticed that she was a witch? And why he constantly wanted to shake her hand, the reason for his behavior was completely unclear to the girl. Besides, Ariana seemed to care about this, and yet the lady decided to grab the man's hand. But she did it with such force and amplitude that it resulted in a loud bang. No matter how hard the Emperor restrained himself, he still could not hide his laughter at that moment. Nevertheless, they walked together, holding hands to the place the lady needed. Even on the way, Ariana noticed that for reasons unknown to her, Khan was constantly smiling. What amused the guy so much, the girl still did not understand. To improve his good mood, the lady decided to point out that 3 participants had already died. She also briefly explained the cause of the last girl's death, suggesting that the poor noblewoman had committed suicide. In a second, the Emperor's expression became rather sad, which the heroine decided to note out loud. Then the man openly said that he was not amused at all. In response, the lady suggested that the whole event be canceled for these reasons. The girl's statement seemed to be misheard by the guy. But the next chosen one confirmed a second later that she meant exactly what she said. After all, it was not at all necessary for Mrs. Diana to become a human. And the beauty did not understand such a big surprise of Khan at that moment. The lady suggested that the Emperor's wife remain a witch, and then there would be no point in this circus in principle. Diana's admirer knew that this girl was already playing the role of the Empress perfectly. Ariana did not understand the point of this event in general. Because of the heir to the throne or what? Yes, witches can't give birth. But why does it have to be Khan's child? You can just find a smart and clever kid and raise him. But the guy in this situation could be understood. The young man pointed out that Diana had announced the bet on behalf of the witch, and the competition had already begun, so he had no idea how it could be canceled, which he told the lady. Although Ariana stated that it would be easy to cancel this whole nonsense. If Mrs. Diana personally revealed herself, there would be no point in continuing. The dispute would be considered incompetent, and Mrs. Diana would not have to stop being a person. Besides, the participant noted that in this best-case scenario, the Emperor would not have to suffer over the choice. Otherwise, he might choose God knows who as his Empress. The girl thought that if Khan announced this in front of the other participants, then the bewitched Countess would surely understand everything and reveal herself. No matter how you look at it, this argument is not in Diana's favor no matter what the outcome. An exemplary witch must either give up immortality and power, or the Emperor. Either way, she will lose something. But that evening, His Majesty the Emperor really did behave strangely. After he had listened attentively to his chosen one, the guy just turned around, could not say anything unnecessary to the girl, and asked to postpone the walk until next time. What was that? What was wrong with him? Did Ariana say something wrong? The girl still did not understand. After some time, the girl returned to the eastern part of the palace to help her friend and her brother with the treatment of abrasions after the fight. Well, as soon as the heroine gave the guys the medicine, she again felt an unpleasant feeling inside. The girl realized that someone had gotten into her room again. That's why Ariana decided to go home. The competition is in full swing. It is unclear who will be the next target, but the main character of this story has already been lucky twice. These non-humans, other competitors, have completely lost their fear. This time they put a poisonous snake in the girl's bed, but they seem to have attacked the wrong one. It's good that snakes love witches. One bite from this beauty would be enough to kill any mortal. And although Ariana didn't know who did it, the young lady was convinced that the culprit would definitely pay for it. She decided to show who did it with her own powers. Imagine the girl's surprise when her powers showed that one of the guards had planted a poisonous beast. He wasn't participating in the competition, so why would he need it? Then the beauty remembered that she saw this guard when he was with Carl. That day, Jesse died. So why did he decide to kill the heroine then? He shouldn't have any obvious reasons. Most likely, someone is behind him. The participants could lure him to their side. Anna is also under the protection of a guard. Carl is watching her. Ariana did not know who was pulling the strings, but she knew very well that this person would have to pay dearly for it. That same day, the candidates noticed that Ariana was following the guards like a tail, and even considered it suspicious. Although someone suggested that, most likely, the girl simply realized that nothing would work out with the Emperor, and decided to change her strategy. It would be a shame to return with bare hands in any case, and this way, with a gentleman. Meanwhile, the guards themselves were discussing the fact that the participants had recently started to take an interest in the guards. Some of them even whistled at the employees sometimes. To be honest, one of the bodyguards even thought that the knights were enjoying the girl's attention. At that very moment, the enraged Ariana ran straight up to the knights. She immediately grabbed the guard by the collar, trying to ask him if the man was busy. From the outside, it seemed as if the girl wanted to get the guard for her own personal purposes. But the lady was only going to talk to the man. How lucky she was that Carl let the knight go at that moment. As soon as the guys were alone, Ariana did not feel sorry for the guy and threw him into the wall with all her strength. Initially, the young man began to assure that he did not understand the lady's malicious attitude towards him. In turn, Ariana continued to threaten this guy, telling him that she had recently bought a pretty good knife. The knight tried to calm Milady down, explaining that there was no benefit to her from killing the guard. In response, the girl only pointed out that there was no point in the guard killing the participant either. Now Ariana was so determined that she was seriously ready to kill this guy, even without receiving explanations and justifications, because she herself, first of all, could suffer at the hands of a fake bodyguard. At that moment, the guard was seriously scared, so he decided to admit who was behind him. As it turned out, it was all about the Prime Minister. It was Chancellor Morris's order. The man was just doing his job. As it turned out, the boss said he wanted to check something, although the knight himself had no idea what exactly Morris wanted. Besides, the guy didn't know whether the Chancellor was checking all the ladies in this way. Having learned at least some information about the setup, the modest girl decided to let the guy go. The poor guard was gone for 8 minutes, which is exactly why Morris could have suspected something. How good that Ariana managed to find the puppeteer. So it was the Chancellor who turned out to be the Grey Cardinal. The girl decided to tell the closest person in this place, her friend, about the information she had obtained. Besides, Anna knew the information about Morris superficially. But what the man had in mind is unclear. The Chancellor is very cunning and unpredictable. However, his actions definitely raised suspicions. This bastard was always like this. But on the other hand, without his participation, the Empire would not have been born. Then the girl decided to ask if she had the opportunity to meet the Chancellor in person. Of course, the heroine wanted to do this only to take revenge on the head of the government, but Anna decided to warn that revenge was the last thing on her mind. Most likely, she wouldn't even be able to meet the Prime Minister. The Chancellor is a very unpleasant person who, in addition to his disgusting character, also has incredible influence in society due to his status. Every word spoken near him could go against you. People say that revenge creates nothing, but for a witch, beautiful revenge is an art form. That's why Ariana went to the doctor the next morning. Now she decided to start acting on her backup plan. The first thing she did was greet the doctor and tell him that she was the same aristocrat who had recently run for medicine at the pharmacist's request. Ariana had actually helped the woman out that day, and this time she had come for the same thing. The girl explained that she could run for more pills if needed. Even when the doctor explained that there was no need to take additional medications today, since there were few patients and no one to treat, the girl insisted on her own. Then the lady asked the missus to say as if the doctor had sent her for medicine. The young lady confessed that she really needed to go outside the palace for a while. Of course, the pharmacist did not even listen to the lady. And although Ariana assumed that nothing would work out, the girl was not pleased that she was scolded like a little child. Now Milady had no idea how she was going to get to Morris. She couldn't help but recall what her friends had said about the Prime Minister being famous for his extraordinary wisdom and amazing strategic knowledge. He also differs from the other candidates in one way. His army was able to achieve a great victory not only because of his amazing leadership. The Chancellor is an excellent swordsman, although he looks quite frail. Although Ariana did not see anything scary in this. Well, he fences and fences. After all, the man tried to kill the lady, and the witch will not let it go. After the heroine left the medical center, she noticed a couple of other ladies. These girls were talking about Ari, saying that she was wandering alone in a suspicious place. Unfortunately, the situation in the palace is such that you can't even walk around calmly. Someone will start to suspect something is wrong. Then a brilliant idea came to the lady's head: to climb over the fence, because the little girl did not want to cancel the meeting with Morris. But as soon as the girl approached that very fence, a guard immediately noticed her. He ordered the respected one to move away from the fence. According to the Emperor's order, no one is allowed to leave the palace during the competition. To cover herself, the lady began to tell that she had not even thought of climbing over, but had simply suddenly wanted to cling to the wall of the Imperial Palace. Then the lady had a brilliant idea of how to get away. She decided to ask the guard if he knew a guard with golden hair, blue eyes, and a small scar on his face. The girl said that this man had asked her to wait for him here. He wanted to give her something. In addition, she also added Carl to make it more convincing, as if the senior knight knew about her meeting place. In response, the guard claimed that he could run to the knight and bring the thing that the young ladies were supposed to give. But Ariana took advantage of this and asked him to tell her where the knight was now. It turned out that the young man was now in the palace. The heroine had come here with Anya before, but they were not allowed in then. This time, the same guards were on duty, and they were also not going to give the young chosen one a break. In addition, the guys were quite aggressive. They even stabbed knives right in front of the woman's face. Then Milady decided to say that she was not going to come in and asked the servants to lower their weapons. Ariana began to actively ask where Morris was now and ordered him to be brought to her immediately. The girl ordered the servants to do this in a tone as if she was already the Empress of the palace. In addition, she found out that the Prime Minister was currently in the Central Palace. Since the Miss could not appear in the main area of the palace, she begged to bring the man to her. She blackmailed the guards so much that she even threatened their own death. And it sounded quite convincing coming from Milady's lips. Ariana didn't like blackmail or spilled blood, but if a man raised a sword against her, she could respond in kind without remorse. The arrival of the guest was immediately reported to the chairman of the Council of Ministers. The guard reported that the respected Ariana had definitely decided to visit their palace. In this way, the guard tried to convey to Maurice that Ariana was the Empress. Besides, the Prime Minister himself said that the chance was quite high. But now the guard thought that he was convinced of this. Just looking at her eyes, burning with rage, a lot could be understood. People who had only heard of Diana in legends sincerely admired her exploits. But the soldiers who saw the witch in battle with their own eyes could never forget the primordial fear they felt then. The guard recalled with horror that day the words the girl had chosen when she blackmailed him. It seemed so familiar to him, as if he had been transported back to the war. "I will kill you. I will find you, and I will definitely kill you. I have no conscience." And so on. In fact, Morris even reacted with a smile to the guard's news. Now the man was convinced that he had really killed Jessie for a reason, and was even more proud of himself and his intuition. Morris was informed that Jessie had entered Ari's room with the intention of assassinating her. But another lady had managed, secretly from everyone, to leave Jessie in a quiet, deserted place. Moreover, there was not a scratch on the ladder. The Emperor's chief assistant knew that if Ariana was Lady Diana, neither people nor poisonous snakes could take her. Therefore, after the guard's further arguments, the man made a decision. Since the girl wanted to meet him so much, he saw no reason to refuse her. That is why, after a few minutes, the Prime Minister greeted the guest from the Eastern Palace. Then the girl immediately admitted that she had gotten her hands on a little thing that belonged to the man himself. That is why she came with the purpose of returning this thing. Then, in a second, the enchanted snake jumped out of the girl's hand. But it was unable to reach Maurice's face and take revenge on the impudent fellow for his disgusting trick. As it turned out, the man had a protective magical barrier placed on him. Witch's seal. This thing is a kind of mark that a witch leaves on something she wants to protect. A transparent hint that says, "Don't touch." Of course, it can't protect from everything in the world, but the effect is very strong. The object that the seal is placed on is very difficult to destroy. It is very difficult to create several such seals. And among witches, there is an unspoken rule. Do not touch the object of the seal. And Maurice has the seal of Lady Diana. It turns out that Ariana will not be able to take revenge on him. The man could only thank the witch's seal. Although the lady herself did not understand why the Empress had cast such a strong spell on such a person, now the girl only had to come to terms with her failure to take revenge on the man. But she also threatened him that if something like this happened again, he would suffer. She wouldn't be able to kill Morris, but she could create hell in his lifetime. Ariana promised to come up with something. At that very moment, the leader of the Knights appeared on the horizon. He ran up to the girl and stood right in front of her, thus covering her fragile body with his body. Immediately after that, the guy turned to the Chancellor, asking the man whether he was going to participate in the competition. Why Carl came and what he was saying at all? The lady did not understand at all. But the man at that moment only continued to tell that the competition was held between the Emperor, Empress, and 108 participants, so Morris had no place there at all. In addition, Carl added a request to stop playing with people. Although Morris never considered himself a villain, the man did not see anything bad in his actions at all. After all, it was the lady who threatened him with eternal suffering. In response, the knight only advised the minister to put his hand on his heart and think, "Everything will become clear." After which, Carl took the Miss's hand and led the girl towards the exit. Thus, they reached the Eastern Palace together. Before saying goodbye, the knight decided to apologize for such rude treatment. As a rule, he does not allow himself such impudence when treating girls. As it turned out, the guy came to Ariana, because Anya told everything. She said that Morris tried to kill the girl. Besides, one of the 108 participants had not caught the boy's eye today, so he decided to find a candidate. And thank God. Otherwise, there would be trouble. At that moment, the heroine also noticed the cold sweat appearing on the man's face. It was clear that he had been sweating while looking for his chosen one as Empress. Based on this, the young lady thought that the guy had fallen in love with her. Without languishing for long, she decided to directly ask the knight about it at that very moment, pointing out that he was trying to help her at breakneck speed. Ariana was truly flattered. To avoid embarrassment, Carl decided to change the subject to Morris's obsession with war. Since the war ended, the Prime Minister had nothing to do, and now the strong warrior was even afraid that the man would try to use this competition to satisfy his terrible desire. The strongest knight of the kingdom really didn't understand why the choice fell on Ariana, although it seems that Carl slowly began to guess. In any case, the words of other people about this man prove once again that Morris is truly crazy. What was the boy saying all this for? He was leading the lady to ask her not to stay alone with the highest civil member. Always stay close to the other participants. Although Ariana clearly did not want to listen to him at such a crucial moment, the girl paid more attention to how her friend's brother was worried about her, although he had always snapped at her before. Ariana really appreciated such attention, especially from a person of the opposite sex. Of course, the man denied any concern about the lady, arguing that he had simply decided to keep an eye on the noble woman when he had a free minute. But you can't fool a woman's intuition. What other free minute? And yet the guy had to admit that if it weren't for Anna, he wouldn't have even paid attention to the lady. Ariana is his sister's first friend. Under the old regime, their family had noble status. True, they had neither power nor wealth, only a name. Aristocrats are always driven by profit. As a rule, either money or politics. And therefore, it was difficult for the gentle and vulnerable, according to the first child in the family, Anna, to find a friend. Now the knight admitted that Anya is sincerely worried about Ariana. That is why the girl asked her brother not to upset the participant. Besides, Carl showed himself every time as a real older brother. This time, he even admitted that if Ariana offended his little sister, he would not forgive her so easily. As soon as the man disappeared from sight, the main character of this story seriously thought about Anna's anxiety. But this description, tender and vulnerable, it seemed as if Carl did not know his sister well. The next day, the guard asked the chancellor if the chief was going to give information and his assumptions about Ari. The guard understood that if His Imperial Majesty could not find Lady Diana, he would lose the argument. But then the strategist pointed out to the servant that although the probability that the real mistress is Ariana is quite high, it is too early to say, especially when someone else's fate depends on the opinion of the sea. At that time, the man showed with all his appearance that he believed that Madame Ariana was not the Empress. After all, the Prime Minister could say with greater certainty that this girl was an ordinary simpleton from the people. The whole situation seemed quite funny to the ruler, although the guard did not understand the captain's train of thought at that moment. 2 months have passed since the participants moved into the palace. Today was supposed to be the feast of the Holy City. On this day, while waiting for the blessing of the Holy Creator of the kingdom, it is customary to eat soup made from carrots and cabbage of the fresh harvest. This does not apply to witches. Witches do not eat soup on this day, but perform a ritual dance to call upon the power of the earth. And naturally, it is better to perform it in the company of other witches. At least, so as not to look stupid. That day, Ariana could only console herself by thinking that, probably somewhere here in the palace, Madame Diana, just like her now, was performing this dance. When the girl came out of her chambers late in the morning after her favorite ritual, she was extremely surprised. There was no one in the living room. Although everyone should have returned from breakfast somewhere by now, at the same moment, the resident of the Eastern Palace accidentally met another participant in the dispute. The young lady introduced herself as Clara. Ariana said that she believed in another god, which is why she was not in the dining room today. Then the new acquaintance also admitted that she cannot stand vegetable soups, after which the heroine decided to find out if the girls had any event planned for today, since she still couldn't find any other participants. Clara, as it turned out, was also looking for friends. She and Mary had agreed to meet here after breakfast, but the candidates still hadn't arrived. The new friend explained that she had met several girls on the way here, and they said that they had not had breakfast either. After which, since both ladies were hungry, Ariana suggested that they go to the dining room together. When they arrived at the dining room, the girls saw something terrible. Most of the girls in the area were lying on the floor, showing no signs of life. It really wasn't the most pleasant picture. Luckily, a couple of the girls were still moving. Ariana just couldn't stay indifferent and decided to help the participants survive right away. So she asked Clara to call a doctor immediately. Ari was most interested in one single question. Where is Anna? How can I find her? In a second, the heroine remembered that her friend had beautiful pink earrings, which made the girl stand out from the crowd. The shine of the aristocratic chandelier was directed at the emerald located right in Anna's earrings. Her friend was also lying motionless on the floor, and foam was coming out of her mouth. A few minutes after the doctor examined the girls, the doctor explained that poison had been mixed into the soup. And although the doctor did not know who had done it, the act was clearly vile. Fortunately, the poison itself is not lethal, but in high doses it can kill. In this case, half a bowl of soup is enough, but even those who ate less will still need to undergo proper treatment. Although even in such a not very positive and difficult moment, some participants were only glad that the dead participants were eliminated from the competition. Opposite, there were girls who demanded that the antidote be brought quickly because the doctor must provide medical assistance. Such are the rules. But the pharmacist really could not give any guarantees, although she was going to ask for help. The palace doctor knew from the start that she was about to have an unpleasant conversation. Poison is very bold and at the same time clever. Anyone can come into the dining room. It will not be easy to figure out the culprit. Morris immediately thought about this. But first of all, the chancellor was told that the doctor was unable to create an antidote. The palace's chief physician must be informed immediately. Although Morris was clearly in no hurry with such an important request. That same night, the exhausted Anna finally woke up. As soon as the young lady opened her eyes, she saw her best friend on the bed in front of her. Since the lady was unconscious, or rather even in a weak coma, she did not even immediately understand what had happened. But Ari's reaction made it clear how much her friend was worried about her loved one. As soon as the aristocrat came to her senses, the girl immediately pounced on Anna with a tight hug, asking the miss about her well-being. Anna couldn't immediately understand whether she was actually in pain after the unpleasant incident. But at the same time, the girl still felt safe, because at that moment she was in the strongest and most beloved embrace of her entire life. In the embrace of Ari. 200 years ago, the main character of this story, a hereditary witch, had already stumbled upon a case where she saw a dying man. The times were harsh. There was too much frost in their area, so the man died of cold. But when she faced death, the young girl, an immortal being, felt nothing else. The witch had no sympathy for anyone. But that was before. Now Ariana became the happiest person in this world as soon as she saw Anna, who had come to her senses again. In fact, if the witch had not used magic, her close friend would not be here now. Although when the participant immediately noticed that her interlocutor was not looking very well, her friend lied, saying that she was just a little overtired. So much had happened. It was scary to even remember, by the way. Ari decided to ask the patient if she remembered anything. Right away, the friend told that someone had mixed poison into the soup. The young lady explained that all the participants who were in the dining room had gotten it. In fact, Anna really didn't notice anything. Besides, the lady, as far as her memory served her, had eaten quite a lot. It was true if Ariana had been a little late, Anya could have died. But who could have done something like that? It was definitely worth finding out. Of course, as soon as all the ladies who were in danger slowly came to their senses, they decided to guess who the real villain was. One girl screamed that it was Anna who put poison in the soup, because she did it next to this girl, and she ate almost the entire bowl of soup, but she did not die. This character also said that she didn't like vegetable soup, so she only ate a couple of spoonfuls, but her body was covered in blisters. So the character could really blame the contestant for looking too good. Then, of course, her friend came to the defense of Miss. Ariana tried to explain that if Anya did this, then what would be the point of her risking her life and eating a whole plate? The girl could have limited herself to a couple of spoons, but the contestant did not change her mind. Now she voiced the assumption that the young lady could have taken the antidote in advance to avoid suspicion. And then the scandalous contender noticed that her defender, Ariana, was not in the dining room at all. The friends really did look like they were in a conspiracy. The noise in the Eastern Palace was real. The main character of this story really didn't even know what to do now. She was so worried about her friend that she didn't foresee such a situation. Fortunately, Carl suddenly appeared to protect the lady, who was able to calm the girls down quickly and easily. The guy explained that in order not to keep two more innocent girls just like that, just like Agatha, they should calm down. The man ordered everyone to shut up and go to their rooms. After the unpleasant situation, the heroine continued to reflect on all the injustice of life in this house. The young lady only wanted to save Anna, who knew that it would backfire on the ladies like that. But if it weren't for the witch's magic, another participant would have died. Carl decided to share the lady's worries. The guy saw how the girl was worried about his sister. To calm his rival down a little, the knight said that Anna had already calmed down more or less. She said that she wanted to sleep, so her brother left her. In fact, after the soup incident, everyone is on edge now. The guard thought that the other misses simply needed to blame someone, but they couldn't react to it. They shouldn't follow the lead of provocateurs. Carl's idea was indeed sensible. Ariane had nothing to blame herself for. The one who mixed poison into the soup was to blame. Subsequently, the Emperor's chosen wife persistently decided to start searching for the culprit. But then Carl brought her down to earth a little, pointing out that even if the girl found out who did it, she still wouldn't be able to hold that person accountable. Such a competition. But at least it would be possible to prove Anya's innocence, because her best friend won't let this go. Anna is now under the gun of the other participants, and Ari won't let society ruin the girl's reputation. The first thing the boys decided to do was go to the canteen. There they found out that the cook didn't know anything. Besides, it would be strange if poison was found in the food, since the cook was the main suspect. And yet Carl decided to clarify whether the cook was by any chance rooting for one of the participants. Although it was obvious from the man that he really was not on anyone's side, and in fact, how could one root for anyone at all? They all looked the same. Then the knight mentioned that he had heard that the cook was in a rather close relationship with one of the participants. It was about Katie. They were friends and had a pleasant conversation, but the cook insisted that the friends were not so close that a man would do something like that for her. And while we're at it, the cook said that there were fewer people among the servants who weren't friends with her. And the employee confirmed more than once that he tasted the food while he was cooking. And the other cooks tasted it that day too. Now all the kitchen staff are healthy. This meant that the poison was put into the soup before serving. since the chef and the other cooks were normal, but now the question arose as to who had smeared the plates with poison in advance. In addition, the guys, after their questioning, noticed that the chef was hiding something. Ariana even suggested forcing the employee to tell them, but it was impossible to put any pressure on the cooks, since the investigation of the night and one of the 108 participants was not official. If it had been possible to formalize it officially, Carl would have already turned the entire kitchen upside down and found this damn poison. For a second, the heroine thought that if it weren't for Mrs. Diana, the girl would have already found the evidence with the help of magic. But then, in that moment, the lady realized one detail. Mrs. Diana is also a witch. It turns out that she also didn't eat the soup. She performed a ritual, and this is really a real chance for Ari to find the Empress. If many participants leave the game at once, the probability of finding Ms. Diana will increase dramatically. The Emperor was probably thinking the same thing now. At least Ariana herself was leaning towards this version of events. Miss hoped that Khan knew about what had happened and was worried about his real daughter-in-law. Although the girl still did not understand how the young man had not yet thought about her request to refuse this competition. But one could look at the situation from the other side. On the contrary, the staged poisoning could have been the work of His Majesty. The main character thought about it seriously, but the young lady will not be able to get an answer to the troubling question anytime soon. She needs to persistently continue her investigation, and then all the cards will be revealed. After the investigation, the knight decided to compliment his partner, out loud inspired by what an amazing girl Ari was. At that moment, the miss latched onto this adjective so much that she added a couple more attractive features of her own, which made the knight laugh. This behavior of the young man really surprised the lady. For some reason now he did not snap back, as always, but behaved like Anna. The man was surprised first of all by how calm Ariana was. Ordinary people. What can I say? Even trained knights would start to panic in this situation. So that is why Carl noticed all the peculiarity of his acquaintance. On that seemingly ordinary day, something was definitely wrong with the greatest knight of the Empire. But how pleasant that moment was for Ari. As if the young man suddenly began to consider them comrades, or fell in love with the girl. Meanwhile, His Majesty was sitting in his imperial study, thinking about the latest events nonstop. The man felt that something was bothering him. Most likely, the feeling of anxiety inside was caused by the same situation with the recent poisoning at the festive breakfast. At such moments, Morris really could not understand what was on the mind of His Majesty. To lighten the mood and cheer up his boss, the Prime Minister suggested telling a funny story. The man decided to talk about the participants. First of all, the head of the executive power in the palace said that there was a rumor that Anna was to blame for the poisoning. Secondly, there was a funny rumor that the knight Carl was in a love relationship with one of the participants. The story about Carl really made the king laugh. Their sharp bow fell in love with a girl with Diana's face. Khan hadn't heard anything more fun in a long time. Besides, in some ways, it would even be easier for the emperor from such a relationship of one of the contenders for the chosen one as his wife. Since this participant got close to Carl, it means she is not Miss Diana. As a joke, the young man even suggested that the guys organize a wedding in the palace village. But Khan laughed and joked about the knight and his object of adoration until he found out that this girl was a pretender named Ariana. Meanwhile, the guys themselves were once again exchanging interim results of the investigation when they met at their favorite negotiating spot. Unfortunately, the heroine failed to find out anything that day again. But during these days, Carl was convinced of something for sure. Ariana is definitely not Her Majesty. You could tell just by looking at how casually the aristocrat wore the expensive handmade dress. Although, in fact, whether Ariana was Mrs. Diana or not was not important now. Unfortunately, there was no progress in her and her boyfriend's plan, and Anna was still upset. At the same time, the girl was tormented by another question. Is the knight Carl in love with her? When the participant asked him last time, he was shocked. Today, he simply avoided answering. Now, it really seemed to the princess that the guy was in love with her, but he behaved as always. He did not try to impress the girl. At the same time, misunderstood that the priority now was a case on a completely different issue. She would be able to sort out her personal life later anyway, but now she should think hard about further actions before the serial killer killed the other participants. Carl and Ari's investigations have been going on for 2 days now. It was recently revealed that one of the participants, who had been severely poisoned, had died. This made the girls even more inflamed. In order to protect Anya, her brother has locked her in his room. The knight brings her food there 3 times a day. The room is guarded by the senior warrior's subordinates. But because of all this, the other participants believe that it is Anna, who is the real Lady Diana. After the talks with their colleague, the guys accidentally noticed the image of His Imperial Majesty in the distance. The guy looked, as always, neat and handsome, but even from a distance, the girl felt something was wrong and noticed the gentleman's bad mood.
What really happened? Such a serious thing the girl did not know yet, so she decided to immediately head towards the Emperor, the only heir to that for the culprit of the crime had together with Arya, the knight also approached Khan.
When the boys greeted the head of the castle, Khan greeted only Ari first. The man said out loud how glad he was to see the girl, and a radiant smile immediately appeared on his face. What to understand this, especially at a rather dressed-up moment, the ladies still did not know. Literally just now he was serious, like who knows what. But it was clear that the man was a real handsome man. Then the king decided to express his observation that the lady and Carl had gotten along. He also noted, remembering how the guys had quarreled at their first meeting. In fact, the heroine easily recalled that moment, even openly admitting that then the knight seemed to her a completely different person. And now the young lady considered him a pretty good guard, after which Khan admitted that he had heard rumors that the girl was investigating a recent incident. The man immediately noticed what a kind soul and heart one of his chosen ones had. Although the beauty herself was a little embarrassed by the compliments, the miss did not deny her resourcefulness. This contender for the post of the emperor's wife simply had a highly developed sense of justice. As soon as the lady had agreed, the man, quite unexpectedly, decided to invite Ari to join him. The emperor even extended his hand for the lady, although it would seem such a sign of a gentleman did not please Ariana very much. Every time the girl did not understand why the emperor constantly extended his hand. This time the lady decided to give Khan's palm a high five, and with the force she had caught. But how surprised the heroine was when Khan, as soon as the girl's palm touched his hand for a second, gently grabbed the hand of the lady of his heart. The emperor was finally convinced that Ariana simply did not know that this gesture implied that they would hold hands. That is why he decided to directly explain this to the girl. Now Ariana at least understood why the king laughed every time she gave him a high five. Although the young lady was slightly wary, the girl understood that they were all participating in a competition. The only question was whether an ordinary chosen one, not yet definitely chosen by the emperor, could hold hands with the husband of Lady Diana. Although there was a strange feeling, the emperor himself felt it. It was impossible to contradict him in any intentions. Suddenly everything would only get worse. One of his companions throughout the entire walk was worried about the fact that if Madame Diana saw them, then it would certainly not end well. While the young lady was drowning in her endless thoughts, she did not even talk to the man, which the emperor noticed. The Khan noted out loud that his acquaintance was silent today, although she usually chatted about all sorts of strange things. In response, Ariana admitted that at the moment she was simply observing her surroundings. At that moment, the heir to the throne assumed that the lady was embarrassing the guard, and even thought of telling them to leave. But he had no idea that the miss was not at all bothered by these guards. She was worried about something else. Of course, the modest girl did not go into details that day. Instead, the lady decided to ask the guy another question that had arisen in her mind a few days ago, but she had not had the opportunity to ask. Madame meant why the emperor himself was not interested in this. The conversation was about poisoning. The girl once again pointed out that Anna was not guilty, but since Khan was not involved in this, everyone thought otherwise. Then the guy answered that he tolerated all this for the sake of justice. The man's opinion was also valid. 6 participants had died before. Apart from Laura and the other participants who had voluntarily left, there had been no investigation when 5 had died. Would it be fair for the emperor to start one now? Not at all. Well then, the girl corrected the boss. 7 had already died. This morning, another participant had died from poisoning. Now there was 1 more dead. Then the man asked his interlocutor to be kind and answer his counter question. Why was the girl asking him to intervene instead of asking for help for the victims? Ariana did not think so much about what to answer the gentleman that she accidentally expressed her opinion that she herself was not obliged to do anything like that. It seems the girl said something wrong. The lady was thinking more about the fact that she had already cured Anya. All that was left was to get an investigation to prove her friend's innocence, right? Besides, since the victims themselves were not asking for help, why would Miss fight off a petition for them? Ariana would look more like a human being if she presented herself as an egoist. So it was unclear why the Emperor was so surprised. Meanwhile, something forbidden was happening in the main part of the palace. That day, Morris decided to invite Selena to his chambers. She was the first of the participants that the Prime Minister called here. The girl was so afraid of this situation that she couldn't even utter a word. She was shaking so much that it was clear from her that the lady wanted to confess something. The little girl was like an open book, too accessible for superficial reading, especially for such a strategist. In order to get at least some recognition from the girl, the head of the highest membership made her understand that everything was fine, and the man would be able to understand the participant. After that, seeing how difficult it was to start, the guy offered to help her. Then he asked Selena why she mixed poison into the participants' food. As soon as the young man pointed this out, the lady tried to answer him, saying that he himself said that according to the rules, everything should have happened. But then Morris again began to behave like a complete degenerate, once again blaming the girl for all the deaths and her misdeeds. He actually called the lady on purpose because he was just curious about what a person who did something like that looked like. In fact, Selena was aware of all her mistakes, which is why she was so afraid of her future fate. The girls are all competing now, but she simply could not harm Mrs. Diana. Besides, the lady, the current Empress, is an experienced witch who cannot be poisoned. But the other participants, with ease. Even the man sitting opposite considered Selena's answer quite reasonable. Although the guy pointed out that it is good to consider yourself smart, but it is even better to be smart, Morris explained that he could tolerate lies, but never to his face. He knew that Mrs. Diana had been poisoned with an unknown poison during the war, and that she had been unconscious for a month. And now, such a clever and young girl will pretend to such a great logistician that she does not know this. Lady Selene somehow miscalculated that her lie was based on another lie, and they fell under each other's weight. It is possible to poison Lady Diana, but if it suddenly turns out that the actions of one of the participants were not aimed at her competitors, but at Mrs. Diana, then the assassination attempt on the Empress will no longer be justified by the rules. In addition, innocent girls suffered as well. Already at that moment, Selena simply could not stand it and began to cry because of all the nerves. The man immediately came closer to her in order to calm the lady. It seems that such intrigues are alien to her. Now Morris promised to help the contender to bring her concept to mind. The next morning, the main character of this story, Countess Ari, was awakened by a bright ray of sunlight, blinding the lady's bed. As soon as the young lady woke up, she began to think that Anya was still in her room, and the other participants were hostile to Ari because they were close to her. That same morning, Madame recalled her recent negotiations with Carl regarding her misunderstanding of why the Emperor was still involved in this dispute. The beauty did not yet know. It was then that the guy said that he assumed that Khan was doing all this for the sake of justice. In response, the girl simply could not help but ask what kind of justice could we talk about if the prince did not even know how many participants had died. Perhaps the Emperor did not care about this dispute at all. But Carl understood perfectly well that such an option was practically unrealistic. Otherwise, the Emperor would not have agreed to such an absurd bet. The knight continued to defend the king, basing his argument on justice. Khan must not have expected such unrest to break out. He had given the go-ahead for the contest. People would not approve if he suddenly began an investigation only now, after the poisoning. Besides, the knight knew that if the culprit was found, the pace of the competition would come to naught. This could well be the reason why the Emperor ignored the deaths of people. That same evening, Miss Airy decided to ask her accomplice how Madame Diana would feel about what was happening. Carl was absolutely sure that the Empress would be against it, but would not start this argument. Why did Mrs. Diana come up with all this? If she really loves the Emperor, she could have made sacrifices. Why is that? It is completely unknown now and quite logical to understand. To be honest, even the palace staff did not understand why this whole argument was happening. Anna's brother did not know for sure either, so he decided to ask his friend for her personal opinion on why Diana was testing her loved one in this way. But unfortunately, Ariana could not simply answer this question either. In general, it's not easy to live when there are more than 100 girls with identical faces. But there were some advantages to this. No one would be able to recognize Lady Diana if she decided to eat a bunch of sweets right in front of the other participants. While the girl was helping herself to sweets from the buffet, she accidentally witnessed the following scene. Two ladies were discussing the latest news about how yesterday 5 candidates for marriage with the Emperor refused to participate. And what is surprising is that it was the right thing for a lady to do. Looking at the dinner table, the heroine also noticed that no one had eaten properly. If you take poison in small quantities, you can not only avoid a fatal outcome, but also develop immunity. But if the poison is fatal, then it's all useless. Literally a few seconds later, the beauty also noticed how the guard decided to publicly hang up some kind of announcement. A crowd of girls immediately ran up to the sign to get acquainted with the new rule in more detail. The poster stated that antidotes would be distributed today, but their number was limited. Therefore, the ladies had to be polite and hurry. A couple of minutes later, a whole crowd of girls stood in a huge queue, waiting for that very medicinal antidote. Unfortunately, today again, I had to deal with the most unpleasant employees of the palace. The first thing the man did was to inform the ladies, as they could read in the official announcement, that the number of doses of the antidote was limited, because it had been created in a short time and from relatively scarce medicinal plants. Morris reported that His Majesty, he and the chief physician of the palace, had thought for a long time about who exactly should get the antidote. The man explained that they could not come to a common decision, because it would mean that they would have to choose who would live and who would die. It would be too cruel. Although it was clear to Ariane that Morris was lying once again, since he himself had canceled all the rules, nevertheless, the man announced that for the reasons listed above, they had decided to distribute the antidote randomly. But there would be one rule. The guards immediately asked all the participants to stand in line. The girls standing at the end of the first and third rows had to come up and receive the antidote. The rest were in question. So the key rule was that the girls who got the antidote were not allowed to drink it. That was the catch of the innovation. And if any of the candidates violated this decree, they would be expelled. Morris only asked to show altruism and left the already noisy room. At that moment, the ladies could not believe that the higher powers of the palace would treat them so cruelly. They immediately began to pounce on each other, offering to exchange and try to take the antidote from their own friends. In order not to follow this farce, the heroine thought of returning to her room. She didn't get the medicine anyway. Besides, the lady knew that there would be a fuss now. Everyone would be fighting for the antidote and for their lives. Girls like Ari, who didn't get the antidote, probably had nothing to do there. But then, when the lady had already gone out into the corridor, she met a couple of candidates on her way. In the hands of these misses were those very sacred flasks. And this was really strange, because these participants did not get poisoned. The girls who were not poisoned came out with the antidote in their hands. This is just the height of injustice. The guards decided to first report the brutality of the situation to their captain, the Knight Carl. The guard explained that the antidote was given out in less than half the doses of the total amount, and that the participants who had received the medicine were forbidden to take it. It all sounded, of course, incredibly absurd and stupid. What the Prime Minister could possibly be thinking was completely incomprehensible even to his colleague. After which, the leader of the Knights decided to ask how the participants behaved with the poisoning. The guard reported that there was no rigging, since the Knights were on guard. The chief then ordered that they should not let down their guard, because the Prime Minister advocated fierce competition among the girls. After such a step, the atmosphere in the castle could become even worse. Before he could even finish speaking with his employee, Carl saw Lady Ari on the horizon. The girl waved her hand furiously at her acquaintance so that he would notice her. Only after that did she run closer to the knight. They understood each other literally without words, so they immediately began to talk about the latest news. Carl decided to ask his sister's friend if the girl was worried that the atmosphere might get tense. In fact, although all the candidates were nervous about distributing the medicine, everything wasn't that bad. Ariana didn't even think about complicating the situation. But the Prime Minister's decision at least prevented the young ladies from concentrating on finding Mrs. Diana, after which the man also learned that Ariana had not received the antidote. But on the other hand, this was even good news. It meant that the lady would not become someone's target. The girl considered such a manifestation of attention as a sign that the interlocutor had fallen in love with her. Carl himself did not understand where her friend got such endless confidence from. Of course, this whole situation worked out well for Ariana, but in the future, the situation could get more complicated. If something happens, the knight ordered the participant to find him. If you suddenly need the help of a real man, then you should definitely run to the most trusted person in this palace, Sir Carl. To be honest, the people here are really strange. But be that as it may, the main character of this story seems to have already come to terms with all these nuances of life in the house. By the way, in the house. Meanwhile, in the castle, the battle for the antidote was still going on. One girl was begged by 3 other participants to give her the antidote. Each wanted to get this potion, so she expressed a certain reason why she should get the medicine. The ladies pointed out that the owner of the jar could not take the antidote, so she simply had to give it to one of the 3 chosen ones. Even a friend blackmailed the lady for the sake of the coveted drink. And another acquaintance pointed out that she lent the lady a pearl decoration on the day of the meeting with His Majesty. Each young lady tried to lure the owner of the medicine to her side in order to get the flask. For Ari, the situation was calm at that moment. Since the lady did not have the antidote, the other candidates did not even bother to look in the direction of the beauty. Everyone was really just looking for someone who could pass the antidote on to someone else. People were literally begging each other to give them the magic medicine. Everyone was going crazy over that little flask. The atmosphere was so crazy that some girls who had the potion literally forced other participants to bark and walk on all 4s in order to get their desired bait. And although no one wanted to humiliate themselves, the crazy aristocrats pointed out that the other girls simply had to overcome their pride to get the coveted medicine. One lady got so carried away that the slave overdid it while making the girl bark and began to choke. The poor girl simply begged to give her the medicine since she had already fulfilled all her whims. And although this poor thing looked the worst of all, the owner of that very medicine had not a drop of conscience. The mistress only calmly declared that she had long ago promised to give the bottle to Nancy, a completely different young lady. It was so strange to see how people who had a small flask in their hands became crazy and seemed to feel like the master of everyone around them. They stopped fulfilling their promises about giving medicines to their slaves. But looking at such ladies, it became clear that this was definitely not Mrs. Diana. Selena, looking at the shameless lady, could not stand it and demanded that the medicine be simply given to the poor thing. This aristocrat had already heard that the impudent woman had such a bad character. Now they both started snapping at each other, and Selena even called Ari a bad word, who just silently watched her competitor from the side. Lately, no one can come to a compromise. 3 days have passed since then. After the distribution of the antidote, the situation is as follows. 3 people died from poisoning in the Western Palace, and 2 more died during the fight for the antidote. A girl who showed no symptoms of poisoning also died. Rumor has it that she was drawn into a fight when another participant tried to take medicine. 2 girls who witnessed what was happening voluntarily refused to participate. 3 died in the Eastern Palace, and 4 more refused to participate in the selection. Thus, there were only 77 girls left who were ready to continue the selection to become the wives of the Emperor of the Khan Kingdom. That day, the future husband of the Empress recalled the time spent together with his failed wife. In the evening, the other half noticed how cold his fiancé's hands were. To be honest, the witch even liked it. This non-human trait was attractive in its own way. And although the Khan thought that talk about cold hands might be too unnatural, the young lady loved him simply for the kind of person this young man was born to be. Now the Emperor was definitely convinced that he needed to end the bet as soon as possible. During the day, the main character of this story decided to take a little walk in the garden. Now the girl just needed a breath of fresh air. It seemed to the lady that Amelia was the worst person in the world, but this is far from true. Along the walking paths, there are bottles and broken vials of antidote. This all proves that the girls do not intend to save their competitors and give them medicine. They seem to be all human, but how heartless. The number of jars given out is less than the number of people who fall ill. And in the end, as many girls will die as the number of antidote bottles that were broken. Ariana seriously considered asking Mrs. Diana, "Do you really want to give up eternal life and your abilities for life in the castle?" How the girl missed Anna. Unnoticed, while the lady was flying in her thoughts, Khan approached her. The guy noticed that, judging by how calmly she moved around the territory, the situation was not that serious. That day, The girl decided to pretend to the guy that she was another participant, so she even greeted the man with a tilt. But the king himself only laughed at the girl. After all, he had recognized one of his favorite participants from the very beginning. It was simply impossible not to recognize such a bright Ari, even if the girl was trying to behave in a way that was not typical of her. This time, the emperor decided to remind the lady what he had taught her during their last meeting. He offered the girl his hand, and she kindly accepted the invitation to walk together. Then the hero said that he would like to watch a play or an opera with Ari, or to give her a gift. But in that case, the countess would become a target in the eyes of the other participants. In fact, no matter how much the neighbors irritated Ari, the girl seriously didn't care about anyone around her. All because the lady was really strong. Such strength of the princess even reminded the emperor of his Diana, after which Khan suggested that they do something else today after their walk. Even though Ariana had come to the palace to break the bet, spending time with Lady Diana's man was not the best idea. But didn't the emperor himself flirt with the other participants in order to find out who was the real Diana? At that moment, the guy seemed to notice that Ariana did not regret the bet. In fact, for the emperor, this bet is not his whim. But it is also pointless to cancel this whole thing just like that. In that case, cancel the bet, and do not let Diana become a human. The young people will not be together. This moment was perfect for the guy to tell one of his secrets, which he had not told other chosen ones. There are several forms of love, for example, love for which a person is ready to give up everything, love for which he is ready to let go of his beloved, love for which he is ready to give up his beloved. But did Lady Diana love someone so much that she was ready to become human for the sake of her beloved? Ariana didn't even believe in it. The emperor himself thought that all these theories were complete nonsense. After all, his companion was sure that if you love someone, you need to hold on to your loved one. Why let go? The girl did not understand. At that time, she even considered all this to be dislike. Hugging his friend, the guy seemed to be assuring her that if it was hard to watch her loved one suffer, then she would have to give in first. It was as if he wanted to say that Mrs. Diana would give up everything to be with the emperor. Even so, if it was hard for his beloved to be with Khan, he would still never let her go. After all, even the tears of a beloved woman should belong to her beloved man. Pressing the girl closer and closer to himself, the guy seemed to be trying to address Diana directly. But first of all, he was addressing a completely different person, an ordinary witch from the people named Ariana. Only the hero himself did not know this yet. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister had once again thought of another cunning move. He wrote a new announcement and ordered the guard to inform everyone. It was time to move on to the next stage. After a walk with Khan, Ariana seriously wondered if her interlocutor was talking about love. Or was this called love? Many witches who fell in love with a person suffered from regrets. And over time, they began to say more often that falling in love with a person is stupid. The other witches were worried about Lady Diana for a reason. They knew what the poor girl still had to endure. At the very least, Diana's reputation was so damaged that the legendary witch could never again be recognized as the best. That's why it seemed to Ariana that love wasn't just a feeling that was thrown away blindly. People were surmountable. They didn't love these creatures, they just used them. But the feelings that the emperor spoke of seemed terrifying to the heroine. When the girl returned to the castle, she was alarmed by the fact that there was no one in the living room. Then the miss paid attention to another official new notice. It asked all participants to gather in the hall. As expected, everyone was already there. In the main hall, Morris was again spouting some nonsense about good intentions turning into something terrible. The man was saying that it didn't matter what the relationship was between the contenders, because they were rivals. Morris was very careful to remind everyone that the goal of all the girls here was to survive, and not to blackmail others with the items they were given. Otherwise, there was no point in it. After which, with a snap of the chief's fingers, the escort knights brought out a certain box. In this box were several jars of potion. As soon as the ladies noticed the contents of the box, they immediately began to assume that the palace staff was going to hand out even more vials of antidote. The misses even breathed a sigh of relief, as the girls considered this a huge relief and salvation. However, Morris then dared to upset the girls. With a grin, the guy decided to start by telling him that according to the doctor's conclusion, many did not use the antidote given to them. The head of the ministry reported that the fact that the ladies had not used the potion for 3 days indicated that the girls simply did not need these bottles. In connection with this, the chief informed that they would take away the unused bottles of Antidote. This news really shocked those around. No one could have imagined that the vials held by the knights would be destroyed. And although the girls screamed loudly and actively tried to stop the master, it was all useless. In a second, the guards destroyed all the potion, mercilessly smashing many glass jars on the floor. The chief just silently watched this spectacle with sparkling eyes. Morris literally enjoyed every second of the moment. The man did not know whether all the bubbles had been collected, so he asked the young ladies if they had any antidote left to return it immediately. The Prime Minister really seemed to have gone crazy. At that moment, the main character even wondered why Mrs. Diana had put the great seal of the witch on such a rotten person as Morris. At that moment, Ariana also noticed how the head of the palace ministry was watching one of the contestants with amusement and attention. At that moment, the girl already suspected something was wrong. That day, the Prime Minister's constant gaze was directed exactly at Selena. After the general meeting, it turned out that several more people had died. The guards found that the room of one contender, Kelly, was empty. They said she had died during the night. And Mallory had died in the morning. Only 75 people remained alive. In this situation, looking at Anna's room, which was chained and guarded by several guards, the other participants in the Imperial Bet considered the girl to be very lucky. The ladies noticed by chance that all the girls were dying like flies and did not understand why Anna was being guarded. Initially, the contenders thought that Anna was Mrs. Diana, which is why she was being protected. But if she really was the Empress, there would be no need for protection. Therefore, the rivals decided that most likely this girl was the daughter of a noble family who came here to have fun. How much everyone began to hate Anna. At the same time, Ariana knew that if she began to stand up for her friend, she would attract even more attention. Therefore, the lady was forced to remain silent. She decided to talk about the exciting topic with the knight, but the situation changed negatively after Prime Minister Morris took away the previously issued antidote. Everyone started gossiping that the beauty was given privileges for another reason. Although if you think about it, she really is here with special rights. And yet, the knight understood that he could not keep Anna in the room forever. And from a security standpoint, it would be best to send her sister away from the castle, away from all possible threats, especially since the situation was becoming increasingly tense. Even Ariana understood this. But was it possible to do this? Especially in this time? That night, the Emperor decided to have a serious talk with the girl who had been removed from everyone. In order not to come empty-handed, the guy decided to visit Anna and brew some strong black tea for his chosen one, just as the girl liked. After which, the Crown Prince wanted to inquire whether the lady had managed to get along with the other participants. "Quite," was the lady's answer. After which, without further explanation, it was already clear that the staff's affairs were not going so smoothly. Emperor Han knew that he should apologize, since the king had previously forced the girl to spy on everyone. It was obvious that the lady was truly scared after everything that had happened. And the man also took the whole situation very badly emotionally, feeling disappointed and depressed. The guy didn't want to contact anyone and, moreover, continue the bet. To be honest, the Crown Prince was just tired. He just couldn't wait for it to end. And the empty place of the Empress hurt him even more. To support the master, Anna decided to remind him that she was there to help His Majesty. These were not just empty words, because the girl was really ready to do anything for love. The atmosphere was so trusting that the Emperor felt the need to share his assumptions about Ari. The guy seemed to be simply tired of hinting to his interlocutor about his assumptions that Ariana was the real Diana, so the day had come to say it outright. Although Khan could continue to drag out and postpone this conversation, the worries simply did not give him any peace. However, despite his assumptions, the Emperor was still at a loss. He was confused and could not make a final decision. In some moments, Ariana really resembles Diana, but in others, she is radically different from the young lady. Therefore, Khan was not at all sure how he should behave around the lady. Would he make the right choice? After all, if Ariana was his true lover, how could he be sure of the correctness of his decisions? At the moment, all the thoughts in the man's mind were confused, and every step seemed important and decisive to him. After listening carefully to the man, his interlocutor decided that it was time to express her opinion. Anna admitted that she did not think that Ariana was like Mrs. Diana. And whether to take this into account or not, Khan had to decide for himself. Anna is a girl from a noble family who has known His Majesty since childhood. She was Carl's younger sister, and the relationship between them was distinguished by special respect from the very beginning. The girl had already once promised Morris that she would take full responsibility for her actions and would always keep her word. That was why Anna was so easy to tell the details about the Prime Minister's bad character. At the same time, it cannot be ruled out that Ms. Diana is disguising herself as a participant, calling her Anna. Now everything was really too confusing. The next morning, Knight Carl, as usual, decided to find out if everything was all right with his sister. After a series of troubles, calmer times had arrived. Now the pretender's food is carefully checked and no one is allowed into her chambers. The guards do an excellent job of keeping an eye on the Countess every minute. But Carl, like a true elder brother, was still very worried about his separated chosen one. If only the guy could persuade Anna to give up this matter. Let her try to support His Majesty. The knight still believed that there was no need to take such a risk and put his life at risk. Carl was so worried about his soulmate that he even thought about asking her Ari to talk Anna out of participating in this competition for life. At the same moment, the knight also wondered what class Anna's best friend was. For some reason, Carl was sure that Ariana was not a noblewoman, but at the same time, the lady was mannered and knew the rules of etiquette, which is typical for an aristocrat. In fact, the young knight commander only thought about it because Anna might want to invite Ari to visit them after the bet was over. But it was still too early to think about that now. While the guy was thinking about the best outcome of events regarding his sister's fate, he went down to the hall and saw a rather unpleasant picture. As soon as the crowd of girls dispersed, a single contender appeared by the wall. It was Ulysses. Something terrible was happening to the girl again. The guy immediately asked everyone to move aside in order to approach the lady. Among all the crowd, Carl accidentally stumbled upon Ari. The lady immediately confessed to him that something was bothering her. The complexion of the girls who died after drinking the poisoned soup did not change. This time, it became clear that Ulysses had been poisoned with something else. But unfortunately, it turned out that all the details about the girl's death could only be learned after the doctor arrived. But still, the senior guard decided to tell the other participants that, apparently, this contender did not die because of the poisoned soup. Then he decided to ask the girls if Ulysses had eaten anything unusual recently. Then her friend told the knight that her rival had not consumed anything like that in her diet in the last few days. But there was one big nuance. A special antidote was given to her by a participant named Selena. It was about the potion that the Prime Minister was handing out. Selena got back to her old ways and decided to cooperate with this impudent freak. True, at that time no one knew about the secret life of what seemed to be, at first glance, the most ordinary participant. At the same moment when the dead girl's friend told that it was Selena who was involved in someone else's poisoning, the main character of this story listened attentively to the name of the person involved. The name was already familiar to Ariana. A few days ago, the lady had overheard Selena arguing with the very girl who had imagined herself to be the goddess of the world as soon as the first dose of the antidote had landed in her hands. Based on what Ariana remembered, everything seemed to fall into place in the girl's thoughts. Nevertheless, Selena herself continued to assure all the ladies that she was not involved at all. But her friend Ulysses did not allow the girl to justify herself at all. The attentive lady assured that she saw everything with her own eyes, and Selena herself said that this was an antidote to the poison that was in the soup. Everything really pointed to the authenticity of the pretender Selene. At the very least, Lady Ulysses lost consciousness after taking that very medicine. Although the accused continued to insist that she really gave the girl a bottle, it was definitely an antidote. Then the knight pointed out that the Prime Minister was behind it. Then the lady began to prove that she had taken one bottle as a spare. The jar was not taken away, as it was not kept in the room. At the same time, the miss did not deny that she had given the rival an antidote. Selena continued to insist that if she had not given the contents of the bottle to Ulysses to drink, the girl would have died. And in any case, Miss would have asked someone else for the medicine. But apparently only the fake rival had the potion left. Selena insistently proved that Ulysses was her best friend, and that she would never kill her. But Lady Nancy was not going to give in either. She had a counter-argument. The claimant connected to Morris had given something to Lady Ulysses, and the young lady was not the only witness. Selena had definitely handed over the bottle in front of everyone. Turning it over in her head, Ariana realized that it was Amelia who was going to give the antidote. Apparently, this girl was very close to the victim. It turns out that participants such as Amelia, Selena, Nancy, and Ulysses were well acquainted. Meanwhile, this foursome was divided into pairs. Amelia and Nancy, Selena, and Ulysses. In this composition, the girls communicated more closely with each other. If we look at Celine's words from another angle, she sees no need to kill an ally when there are many other participants around. However, Ulysses died after taking the antidote Selene gave her. In order not to delay the matter for long, the chief knight of the kingdom ordered the guards to cover the body and carry it away, and in turn, to take the bottle of medicine to the laboratory. Carl was in such a hurry that the heroine did not even have time to tell him her theory about the death of Selena and her quartet of friends. After a couple of hours of research in the lab, the doctor explained that the death was caused by the component from which the vial of antidote was made. This component is the bottle. The antidote itself is not fatal, but it is capable of melting the bottle from the inside. The lab assistant said that this is quite possible when mixing substances, because the components are opposite to each other. In general, they can be mixed, but if the concentration of the substance is too high, the antidote can become poison. Therefore, you should not play with the dosage of dangerous ingredients. Based on the analysis of the substance, it was possible to guess that this was the reason Morris had immediately ordered the withdrawal of this antidote. But it was unclear why it was necessary to develop a remedy that was more like a time bomb than a full-fledged medicinal cure for the symptoms of poisoning. In addition, the doctor reported that, judging by the composition, the drug was developed by Prime Minister Morris himself, although the man has no knowledge in the field of medicine. In addition, the doctor asked and politely hinted to Carl that he should not conflict with the Prime Minister. That's because both Carl and Morris are civil servants. However, the head of the ministry is very different from a knight. Carl adheres to the chivalric code, while Morris is only interested in war, exploration, and fun. In addition, Sir Carl is sometimes overly curious. The lab assistant was simply afraid that the guy could get hurt if he continued to poke his nose into things that weren't his business. In fact, Anna's brother understood all of this perfectly well himself, but he simply couldn't close his eyes. Since Selena is involved in several incidents at once, the disfavor of the other participants passed from Anna to her. And 2 weeks after the poisoning incident, Ariana was finally able to meet her beloved friend. The meeting was so joyful and pleasant that the girls simply ran into each other. After a few minutes of tight embraces, the world seemed to sparkle with new colors. The ladies immediately began asking each other how each other was doing, how their separated days were spent. Not so many days passed in Anna's isolation, but still this separation even strengthened the relationship between the two close friends. Walking in the garden, Anna admitted that she was very happy to feel alive again. Ariana had no idea how much her friend missed their walks together. It was obvious that Anna was bored without her beloved Ari. Despite all this, little sister Carl was even told about what was happening outside. Brothers shared news once or twice a day. After Ariana learned that her friend was aware of all the events, the lady started talking about Morris taking the previously given antidote 2 days ago. Anna had also heard about this absurd act. In addition, it became clear that she also knew that 5 more people had been poisoned to the next world. Now there were only 69 participants in the Imperial Bet left. Ariana supposed, "The worst thing is that no one cares about the death of these 5 contenders. On the contrary, stupid people are happy that there are fewer rivals. Participants who cannot control themselves must be very greedy. And after all, any girl from these contenders in the competition can lead the Empresses at a completely random moment." Although the friends did not know when the duel would end and how many girls would remain alive, the girls simply could not fall into depression every time someone died. Besides, Anna had just left her chambers. There was no time to be sad. It was better to show indifference than to fall into depression. During the walk, Ariana also decided to tell about the participant Selena, who gave the antidote to her friend, but she died after taking it. As soon as Anya heard familiar names, she also confirmed that these 2 girls were really friends. They always stuck together with Amelia and Nancy. Ariana also said that it was Nancy who told Sir Carl that Selena gave the antidote. After all the gossip had been washed out, the girls' topic of conversation smoothly shifted to the night side. Anna admitted that she had heard how Ariana had become close to her brother. And although Carl himself did not directly say this, it was not difficult to notice the brothers' constant communication with the princess, since the knight still often mentioned Ariana when he visited his little sister. When Anna asked to tell about what was happening outside, the guy shared news about Ari. Ariana did this. Ariana said this. Ariana thought about that. The friend even admitted that during her time in the room, she heard so many new things about her interlocutor that she had not guessed before. The aristocrat was pleasantly surprised. It was the first time she had seen her brother like this. Although even Ariana really didn't expect to hear about such behavior from the knight. Well, they were close during the investigation, but was the Sarah really that attached? What a sensitive guy. Besides, Anna assumed that the knight liked Ariana. In turn, the friend replied that the brother always denies it when the lady asks about it directly. In fact, if it were possible, Anna and Ariana would marry each other, since the girls really had mutual friendly sympathy. Although Anna was still worried that if her friend met Mrs. Diana, she would forget about the participant. No matter how much the girlfriends joked, it was still unclear whether Ariana's brother liked the other contestant as a friend or as a girlfriend. But he definitely had warm feelings for the lady. And to be honest, Ariana liked the guy too. At this awkward moment of Ari's confession, the Emperor suddenly, literally out of nowhere, crept up. Fortunately, or unfortunately, he heard the last statement from the beauty. The man himself felt awkward because he had overheard something interesting. But in order not to get worked up, the guy decided to ask Ari directly at that very moment if she really liked Carl. But the girl did not want to talk about this topic, especially with the Emperor. Since the owner of the palace did not receive a direct answer, he then decided to start a dialogue with her friend. Then Ariana learned one interesting fact. As it turned out, Anna had known the Emperor since childhood, since the guy pointed out the girl's shyness, a character trait that Khan had noticed in Anna as a teenager, at 15 years old. At that moment, Miss Anne felt so awkward that she lied and said she had a headache and quickly ran away from the scene. Now the Emperor and the other chosen one were left alone. But before leaving, the king decided to talk to the lady alone and asked her to stay with him here, since he was simply not used to being abandoned like that. Since Ariana was pretending to be Mrs. Diana, the girl decided to give in and stay. But what an awkward silence hung immediately after the guys sat down on the bench together. The man also felt the awkwardness of the situation, and therefore decided to ask the girl directly if it was true that she did not like being around him. And although the beauty didn't seem happy, the young lady explained that she was simply very worried about her friend. Anya was treated negatively because of the poisoning incident. Now, of course, the situation has improved, but the misunderstanding has not been resolved. Ariana explained to the head of the castle that Anna was simply misunderstood, and now the aristocrat is having a very hard time being in this house. Despite all this, the heroine found an excuse for her behavior. She simply does not want to leave her friend, who has only recently come into society, all alone. Despite the fact that the anger of the participants is currently mostly directed towards Selena, the main character of this story was not going to leave the person close to her. After all, everything can change dramatically at any moment. Who knows who will be the next object of society's hatred? Although the Emperor still believed that Ariana was too worried about another girl. After that, the beauty decided to talk about the Emperor's youth, because Khan himself had just let it slip that he had known this girl since he was 15. As it turned out, in their teenage years, the guys had only seen each other a couple of times. When the Emperor visited Carl, Khan knew that Carl was a knight with a lot of experience. The man knew how much he cared about his beloved sister. And besides, the guy was worried about something completely different now. He had heard something interesting earlier. In order not to stray from the topic, His Majesty once again decided to directly ask the chosen one, possibly destined to become Empress, whether she really felt sympathy for Carl. He longed to hear an honest answer in order to understand the girl's true feelings and intentions. Without thinking long about the answer, Ariana calmly confirmed that she was attracted to Carl, noting that he was a really good person. To herself, Miss thought that there was nothing wrong with the Emperor being interested in her relationship with the knight. But at that very moment, something strange burst from the lips of His Majesty. If you are Diana, then this statement is an open declaration of change? The man affirmed, and without even waiting for an answer from his sweet interlocutor, stood up and seemed to be about to leave. At that moment, the girl did not even hide the fact that she did not understand what was happening. What other betrayal? The lady did not say that she liked Carl as a man. The girl did not understand at all why the Emperor was behaving so capriciously. It was as if the Khan was demonstratively showing his offense like a small child. But in order not to offend the guy, Ariana began to explain to him directly that he had misunderstood everything and was clinging to the words. To break the already tense atmosphere, the young lady even jokingly patted the man on his graceful hips. At this point, the atmosphere really relaxed. This unexpected, but at the same time sweet and friendly behavior amused Hans so much that the Emperor even laughed loudly, not wanting to hide his emotions. Something strange always happens near that very participant, but at the same time it concerns only positive harmony. Besides, the Emperor noticed that no matter what he said, the aristocrat took everything as a compliment. This time, the girl reacted like this to the guy's words about how naive she was. At the same time, the man noted that he liked being alone, but at the same time, what about the finished test? At the moment, it seemed to Khan that Ariana really was very similar to his daughter-in-law. But at the same time, she was radically different from Diana. Now, the young man didn't know for sure whether Diana was the real one sitting in front of him. Honestly, the guy didn't even think about what would happen if Ariana turned out to be a completely different girl. It was as if Khan didn't want to spoil the sweet moment when he was truly happy. Oh, this Diana. Diana, what were you like? The image that Ariana remembered about her remained in the capital of the empire 10 years ago. At that time, the maids were talking about the lady from the neighboring palace, the unofficial mistress of the local emperor. Rumors spread that this lady had died during the night. But the problem was that no one knew what had happened. Maybe she had died of illness, or maybe someone had poisoned her. Many people were watching her every move. She lived in a separate palace, but why was she being watched so closely? Was it originally for the benefit of the maid? The answer was much simpler. It was all because the emperor had become very fond of her. The random maid saw this lady only once. The mistress is a terribly beautiful woman. For the old and stupid ruler, her death is a great loss. Unfortunately, at that time, not everyone could get into the imperial palace. It is a pity that many mere mortals never managed to see her. It was only known that the son was completely genetically like her, like his beloved mother. At that time, the conversation was about the young 15-year-old Prince Khan. Despite her low status, the mother of the kingdom's 16th prince, Hana, was an unusually beautiful woman. As a representative of the slums, she was forced to fight for her life from an early age. On the other hand, the upper classes of the empire were only concerned with increasing their wealth through the labor of others. And in turn, the soft-hearted emperor was concerned with only one thing: the state of the powerful nobles, whom he was forced to indulge in everything because of his age and lack of authority in society. For this reason, it was difficult for the lower classes to earn a living. But thanks to the intelligence of a woman who had a hard time with her beauty, the young lady got a job as a servant in the palace. But the maid attracted the attention of the ruler and became his favorite concubine. There was no point in condemning the girl. At that time, everyone was doing what they could. The goal of this particular beauty was to survive at any cost. 2 years later, the maid gave birth to the emperor's son. And after 15 years of living in a remote palace as a doll, her lifeless body was found in the chambers. As she said goodbye to life, she held her heart with one hand, as if regretting her choice. The annual ball for the aristocratic nobility took place the other day. Everyone was waiting for that boy to appear, because the event was rather boring. Every year, the banquet gets worse and worse. Who would have thought that this year the hall would be decorated so simply and tastelessly? It was clear that this was what happened when the ruling family tried to save face at the expense of funds that did not belong to them. Almost no one was in the mood to come here today, but they had to, because they wanted to see someone. It was about that very young Khan, the beautiful son of a beauty. No wonder the entire elite wanted to get their hands on him. Take Count Palm, for example. He's willing to give up half his fortune to get his hands on the boy. The teenager is like a doll that everyone in the empire wants to get their hands on. Even the completely random guests of the event who did not know the boy were very interested in the man who had caused such a stir among the nobles. Everyone simply could not resist the beauty of this handsome guy. as did the random visitors of the party. Among the guests that day was also a family of knights. A boy named Carl and his father were also discussing this evening. Even then, the Pope explained to the little knight that this angel-like youth would help Charles become his ticket to power and the opportunity to change the country. He is different from other princes of his age, and not only because he does not recognize the imperial court. If he gains the support of the nobles, then it is the blood of the ruling family that will allow him to take the throne. The son's father then explained that Khan was a doll that would be used for their own purposes. This initially sounded disgusting, and Carl immediately did not like it. The boy openly began to express his dissatisfaction with the fact that people cannot be treated like dolls, passes, and other inanimate objects. Since childhood, Khan noticed that the greedy nobles saw him only as a luxury item, and how the young man hated such social events. The most hypocritical aristocrats always gathered here, but the little prince simply could not help but attend these events because of his status. That same day, the aristocrat met with the second prince. The man brought up the topic of conversation about how he had heard that the northern lands were famous for diamond mining. He gently hinted that if they were granted the right to develop the mine site, they would contribute to the imperial treasury. But the young man openly explained his point of view. It was easier to save on banquets than to think about possible rights to the mines. The senior representative of the imperial nobility did not expect to hear such a bold statement from some weakling. So in order to put the young man in his place, he demonstratively poured a glass of wine on his head in front of everyone. At the same time, the man pointed out that even after his mother's death, the boy would have to stay in the palace because he was valuable to the little emperor. It was really like a black streak in Han's life. The second Prince Will turned out to have much more ambition than the weak-willed and frail first prince. But he is also stupid, like his father. That same evening, in order to help her peer, the sweet granny offered the boy her handkerchief so that he could quickly wipe the remains of the red alcoholic drink from his face. After that, Khan decided to get some fresh air. The weather that day was pleasantly cool, and the Duchess also did not refuse the boy a walk together. At the same time, the woman herself was immediately glad that she had the chance to talk to the young heir to the throne. It was obvious that the woman wanted to tell the boy something. Next, the granny tried to convey to the young man that she was one of those women who loved everything beautiful. The countess wanted to get everything beautiful, even the rarest gems, works of art, and sculptures. But in her collection, there was nothing more beautiful than Prince Han. The woman pointed out that the child's mother had died, and the emperor who loved her was weak and old. Many wanted to get this boy, but there was no one to protect the boy. That same evening, the woman tried her best to lure the teenager to her side. The countess insisted that if the boy went with her to the neighboring Duchy of Wen, she would promise to give him great power in the empire and the place of the next duke, which sounded quite decent. Then Khan admitted that this proposal was truly wonderful and declared that the Empress was as kind as she was beautiful. But the boy did not forget about the attacks of his own current emperor brothers. However, the lady calmed the boy down, saying that it did not matter to her as long as the boy was thinking about her proposal. After which the old woman asked him to tell her how he would decide on the answer, and handed the boy a certain box. The contents there were not just some trinket. The woman immediately persuaded the hero to perceive this gift as a sign of her gratitude. This is a very valuable thing for which you can buy a small castle. But even this pales in comparison to Khan's magnificent appearance. It was an item from a collection. All those who have power think alike. Duchess Wen. Power and great possessions are concentrated in her hands. She could be used, but the boy understood that if he wanted to survive, he should hardly become a puppet in someone else's hands, like his own mother. That same day, the boy accidentally met a young lady who was sitting in a corner and seemed to be hiding from everyone. The first thing the boy did was tell her that aristocrats of her age had gathered in the neighboring rooms and invited the girl to join them. But the schoolgirl explained that in the opinion of other people, her jewelry was too simple. Without thinking twice, Khan handed the box to this young miss and with a calm soul went on about his business. The emperor did not need this mega-expensive decoration anyway. In that very box were incredibly beautiful and attractive earrings with precious stones. Now these decorations are still hanging on the lady. Now she is already a grown-up Anna. True, the only thing is that the girl now walks around with a strange face because of her participation in the dispute. However, the accessory still looks great on her. After Anna ran away from a walk with her friend, Ariana immediately decided to find out the problem and talk to her friend. Ariana said that she tried to follow her, but His Majesty wanted to know the reason for the Mrs. departure. And when the girl said that she was worried about her friend, he emphasized that Sir Charles would take care of Anna. Based on her reaction to what her friend told her, at that moment, Ariana seemed to have guessed that her friend was really in love with His Majesty. As soon as Anna heard her friend's assumption out loud, she, of course, immediately began to deny it. But just looking at the blush on the lady's cheeks, it was clear that this was indeed the case. At the same time, the girl continued to look quite a sweet, modest girl. Having lived in the Eastern Castle for several weeks, the main character of this story began to suspect that the reason why the girls do not want to refuse to participate even in such a situation is hidden in the very tasty food. Every day, the ladies are delighted with something new. And how nice it was to eat with Anna again. During lunch, the girlfriends also accidentally overheard other girls discussing the latest news. Some of them said that the bet would probably end soon, because His Majesty had already made a decision and was now just waiting for the right moment. Rumors even began to circulate that the real Mrs. Diana had long been found, and that now this young lady was going on secret dates with the Emperor. But the strange thing was that there had been no such talk until yesterday. At the moment, the ladies continued to assure everyone around that His Majesty had asked one girl out on a date several times. They were sure that she was most likely Mrs. Diana, although some still thought that it could be a completely different girl who he simply liked. One rival even admitted that she overheard a casual conversation. "Do you consider yourself Mrs. Diana?" "Yes. The bet will be over soon. Everyone tried very hard. Sorry for dragging you into all this," the girls were quoted as saying. But from the outside, it all sounded somehow not true. However, the problem was that yesterday, His Majesty asked a similar question to Ariana. The main character of this story herself believed that he asked this question only because there were no other participants in mind who would resemble the real Mrs. Diana. With such gossip, everyone around began to think that everything would really end soon, and now they wouldn't have to peek towards the Imperial Palace. Some even liked this news, and some on the contrary. Here, the opinions were divided. The ladies began to prepare to go home, and someone was thinking up a plan on how to still please His Majesty before it was too late. It seemed that most of the participants did not like the latest rumors, and those who decided to give up would have refused to participate long ago. As for Anya, she was as calm as a boa constrictor that day. The aristocrat seemed to be genuinely uninterested in the Emperor, and the lady didn't even try to hide it. Although here, it seemed as if Ariana sensed something fishy. According to rumors, the real Diana is a girl named Cindy from an Eastern palace. The rumors about this lady's adventures did not cease to subside. Many pretenders were sure that behind the mask of an ordinary girl there was someone much more significant and mysterious. By the way, you can only meet representatives of the Eastern Palace during a walk in the garden. At least that's what Ariana herself thought. One day, when the main character finally met that very supposed Mrs. Diana, she immediately noticed that her gait and manners were rather old-fashioned. The behavior of this lady as a whole reminded the style of another era, which immediately caught the eye of the main character, who accidentally became a participant in the Imperial Bet. That day, Ariana also noticed the strange look that Cindy was giving her. The girl smiled at her rival as if she recognized her. The mistress admirer even began to think up a theory about how when a witch hides her magic, even her kindred will not be able to recognize her. And yet, Mistress Diana is special. What if she recognized her colleague? After meeting the supposed Empress, Ariana immediately decided to ask Anya if the girl had ever met Mrs. Diana. Then the lady was asked whether Anna had managed to figure out whether the participant was the real Mrs. Diana or not. Besides, it turned out that Anna was also curious to find out whether the girl, already famous in these circles, was a true mistress. And Ariana thought that this could be easily found out if she asked a few questions about the past. If you look again, Anya is definitely not Diana. At the moment, the heroine was almost 100% sure of this, and could at least somehow breathe a sigh of relief in terms of whether the Lord was hiding behind the image of a simple girlfriend. Anna was quite elegant. But no matter how amazing a girl she was, Anya was Sir Carl's younger sister, something her rival tried not to forget. After Anna had talked a little with the possible mistress, the girl returned back to her friend and immediately received the first question about what she could say about this participant. Then the friend confirmed that this girl knew about the events of the past days. But Anna explained that she had not asked about something that only she and Mrs. Diana knew, because only a few people knew it. Finding herself in such a situation, the girl decided that it was better not to reveal secret information ahead of time. Sister Carl wanted to ask a more specific question, but was afraid that in this case her identity could be revealed. And although Ariana was a little offended that she never found out the truth, Anna could also be understood. This young lady had already said something similar before. Anya easily opened up to her friend and part-time competitor, but at the same time, she does not want the other participants to know who she is. Anya trusts only Ariana, but even the most trivial facts about her friend are completely unknown. The girls became friends after Ariana revealed her secret, and not the other way around. Now the heroine could not sleep well at night because she was tormented by the question of whether Cindy really was Mrs. Diana. At the same time, the witch understood that if she used magic, they could immediately suspect and find out. If Cindy really was Mrs. Diana, she would find out that Ariana was also a witch, which was unacceptable. Ms. Diana might be angry with the contestant for coming here to ruin the bet. The truth is best saved for last, when there is no other choice. But what to think now? What would happen if Cindy turned out to be Ms. Diana? The next morning, Morris approached His Majesty to inform him that the bet might soon be over. Initially, Khan did not even understand what was being discussed. The young man only assumed that the participants had begun a brutal fight again, or that Diana had revealed herself. But then the Prime Minister said that there was a rumor going around among the ladies that His Majesty had already found an Empress. In fact, Khan still had no idea which of the 69 ladies was his beloved. And Morris only made fun of the guy every time about it. If you don't know, how should I know? The head of the department asked jokingly. During the day, rumors had already appeared that the higher powers wanted to unite the western and eastern palaces. The knights who guarded the passage between the castles left their posts after midday. Announcements were also posted in the dining room that the kitchen would now only work in their palace. And in general, it became quite noisy in all the halls. Other girls assumed that this was due to the reduction in the number of participants and that the employees wanted to make their work easier. Or they wanted to increase competition by locking everyone in one space. At that moment, the best friends noticed a girl they didn't know very well. As it turned out, Anna knew that this lady's name was Rosalind. She mumbled something near the participants several times. It seems that this competitor doesn't fit into anyone's company and prefers solitude. If you think about it, she's always in a bad mood. Meanwhile, the Emperor, reading the book, could not stop thinking about the last conversation with the Prime Minister. One of the participants of the Eastern Palace, Lady Cindy, said that she was Mrs. Diana. This was previously reported by Mr. Morris. Although the information was vague, at least, Lady Lola did not make official statements. And in general, Khan was surprised that the Eastern Palace had gathered such naive girls that they believed in all the words of others. At the same time, the Emperor did not particularly believe in the truth of Cindy's words. But Maurice insisted on how similar the local girl was in behavior, manners, and other signs to a real mistress. That's why His Majesty decided to simply order everything to remain as it was for the time being. Khan understood that this was most likely some kind of strategy on the girl's part. Whether it was good or not, that was yet to be determined. But if something went wrong, Diana would intervene, and her potential fiancé knew it very well. If the lady herself did not reveal herself, the Crown Prince was sure that Diana had her own opinion on this matter. Perhaps the real Empress wanted to leave her husband more than he wanted to leave her. And it was quite possible that Diana could be the girl who deliberately did not behave like Diana. Suddenly, she was following a certain strategy. After this conversation, Khan even became curious to talk to this miss personally as soon as possible. He really wanted to meet Cindy at least once. That's why he asked his deputy to organize a meeting for them. But at the same time, the man was really sure that Diana would never leave him. Later, the neighboring palace was informed that Duchess Wen had promised Han the position of successor. Of course, the head of the castle did not like this news at all. Or rather, the king did not understand why they used this bastard to provoke the nobles. The emperor disliked old Lady Wen so much that it seemed to the man that the countess thought he would watch this scum become Duke Wen and seize power. As expected, soon a letter arrived for Khan, stating that the second prince wanted the boy to personally visit Draypham Castle and convey an invitation to the opera. Although it was already late, there was nothing to be done. It was necessary to leave immediately. While the boy was getting to the neighboring kingdom, he couldn't stop thinking about why he was sent to Marquis Drafe. The castle may be far away, but the way to it is quite dangerous. There was no need to go there personally. At that very moment, somewhere nearby, in the depths of the forest, sharp sounds of gunshots were heard, echoing among the trees. Anxiety ran down Mr. Khan's spine like goosebumps. The enemies were already too close. Every rustle seemed ominous, and the silence between shots only increased the tension. The coachman, realizing the danger of the situation, desperately tried to persuade his boss to hide immediately. There were too many attackers, and staying here meant signing his own death warrant. The guy realized that there was no choice. He had to run with all his might. However, the enemies did not intend to let him go so easily. Already on the way to the second prince, the hero felt that something was wrong here, but he could not even imagine how serious it was. Now, when the enemy was very close, there was no doubt. A sharp blade flashed right in front of him, and at that moment his life hung by a thread. "The stupid humans let you escape. Die already, Khan," the sinister hunter said. And even then, the boy seemed to hear a familiar voice. On this day, the young emperor clearly had no intention of dying. With deft movements of his hand, he quickly threw the blade of the sword so that it almost touched his opponent. As soon as the young man exposed the attacker's face, he saw the familiar image of Brother Will. As expected, the coward could have simply sent his men, but he did not believe in them and decided to participate personally. Now the man can be surprised that he will meet his end here. Of course, the brother immediately began to assure that if Han died, the imperial palace would lose only one chess piece, and Will would become the next emperor of the country, which was what the man himself wanted. However, the youngest in the family was not afraid of any difficulties at all, and before killing Will, he promised him to take care of everything. The impulsive act was indeed a problem, because if it became known that it was Han who killed such an important person as the second prince, his safety would be at risk. But nothing could be changed. Apparently, he would have to accept it. At that moment, the guy heard strange sounds from under the bushes. He was seriously scared because now the guy had a witness. It was a girl of quite a pretty appearance, who also liked the stranger's appearance. She immediately realized that those masked bandits were his friends. Lydia decided to apologize for getting rid of them, because the guys were too impudent. But the girl really did the right thing, and even helped the Khan, because they were his enemies. Since there were too many people in dark suits, the lady even laughed and at the same time admired how deftly one frail young man dealt with them. The sweet stranger also promised not to tell anyone about what she had seen that day. But the young people could not talk for long, because the girl was called by her assistant. As she left, the girl said that if everything remained as it was, they would not have any problems. This beauty was Diana, and this whole awkward situation became love at first sight. 2 years had passed since that day, but there had been no major upheavals in the castle. Now, Khan was calmly resting and enjoying himself at another masquerade party at Marquis Perry's. Thanks to the fact that the second prince had accidentally made up an alibi for himself, everyone decided that he had disappeared while hunting. Mr. Will dropped out of the race for the throne, which came as a surprise to many, but only the third prince seemed happy about this turn of events. However, neither the second nor the third prince will be able to change the current situation with Mr. Wen. How the boy felt extremely uncomfortable in this environment. He felt the tension growing, and his only desire was to leave this place as soon as possible, to get rid of the pressure and return to at least some normal life. Well, then his attention was drawn to a beautiful girl, who instantly seemed to destroy all the melancholy around. Khan immediately recognized the very lady who helped hide the truth from everyone earlier. But at the same time, the guy was really surprised to see the young lady at such a noble event. It is unlikely that this miss is the daughter of some aristocratic family. Therefore, the young man was really scared and already began to think that the girl came to tell about the events of that day. Without languishing for long, the guy decided to act and be the first to approach the guest with a sweet offer to dance, while only thinking about what the girl's real intentions were. He extended his hand to the lady, but she, unknowingly, only loudly slapped his palm, turned away from the guy and headed towards the main exit. It happened so quickly that the guy didn't even realize what had just happened between them. At this point, Khan's anxiety grew even more. In addition to the lady behaving strangely, she also went in an unknown direction. The man also decided to quickly find the lady, so he followed her. This girl was quite bold and assertive. That's why, as soon as she noticed that the guy was following her, she literally jumped on top of him. Hi! Oh, so it's you, handsome. Why were you following me? Logically, the girl immediately decided to find out and laughed loudly. The lady suggested out loud that the guy simply had romantic feelings for her, which is why he was so stubborn that he followed her. But Khan was not going to listen to her sarcastic taunts. So he also remarked in response that the lady clearly did not come to this event to enjoy the evening. The man suggested out loud that the lady was going to tell about what happened that day. To his surprise, the girl really had no intention of doing anything like that. She didn't consider this young man her enemy. She didn't even have any bad thoughts about the Duke. As it turned out, Madame came here because she was looking for something special. And since Khan knew this castle well, he could help Miss. It turned out that the beauty had actually been looking for a certain manuscript for a long time. Only the young emperor helped to close her gestalt. The guy still wondered why he was helping this stranger. Although, who knows? If he does not help her, she can tell everything to the highest nobility. Therefore, the emperor decided to pretend to help, and then take advantage of her weaknesses. The manuscript itself was devoted to stories of witches, an ancient race as old as the myths of the earth. Witches possessed incredible powers and were completely immortal, continuing to exist through the ages as unknown creatures existing outside of time. They say that several centuries ago, witches left the mortal world of people, hid their true identities, and went into the shadows. They began to accumulate immortal wisdom. The creatures hid deep in the mountains, cut off all ties with people, and were mentioned only as heroes of legends. The girl read the boy directly from the book, telling him that once upon a time, people and witches had common roots. But at some point, their paths diverged. Witches remain unchanged, ideal by nature, while people are constantly changing, adapting to life. The mysterious girl believed that people change and change endlessly. Their life, culture, and history do not remain constant. Every moment brings changes, and human life itself is a relentless process of transformation, as strange as it may sound. Just listening to her stories, the young emperor noticed how strange this girl was. At the same time, the guy was quite curious about who the hell she was. Before he could ask about her identity, a second later, the guys heard someone enter the room. The adults were looking for Khan. They did not understand where the guy had gone if he had been in the hall before the third part of the program. People even assumed that he had left with someone, but they did not allow this option, because they believed that then they would have noticed the disappearance of the gentleman. Meanwhile, the guy himself disappeared around the corner with his recent acquaintance, so that the guys would not be found. Just then, by chance, the young people overheard the conversations of the nobility about the murderers. Now, all the knightly staff were investigating the murder of the second prince. Everyone was excited by the news that the second prince, Brother Will, had disappeared, and Duchess Wen was desperately trying to get this bastard. The old woman had no children. After her death, her possessions could go to him. The men simply could not allow this. In any case, the king believed that they had a chance if they made a deal with the Marquis of the Southern Lands. Eavesdropping on the adults, the stranger became curious about who this poor guy named Khan was. Imagine the girl's surprise when the young man, sitting right in front of her, admitted that he was the 16th Prince Khan. But there was no need for sympathy about this situation. There was nothing special about it. And the girl herself understood this. Judging by what she had seen last time, sympathy was really unnecessary. The lady meant that her recent acquaintance simply did not look like a weak-willed person. She even persistently offered to repeat what the young man had done that evening, if necessary. The fragile girl was not at all disgusted by his actions. Miss, on the contrary, believed that in this situation the strongest should survive, and one should not forget to maintain authority in society. At the same time, the guy himself understood that most likely he would simply lose. He could only get lucky a few times, but would Khan be able to defeat all the enemies? In his situation, with his position. There were 14 princes in front of him. And the guy was just a puppet of the imperial family and the nobles. Although what worried Khan most at that moment was not his position and situation, but the fact that he had decided to tell a stranger about it. But for some reason, at that moment, while Khan was telling such intimate details of his life, the guy felt quite calm. Having listened attentively to her interlocutor, the lady asked the final question. "But you want to survive, don't you?" The girl believed that everything was in order. And if a person wants something, then any opportunity should be used. The beauty herself followed this principle of life. Then, with a slight movement of one hand, she lifted all her storybooks so that they began to float in the air. After the magic was created, the lady promised that she would always, no matter what happened, protect her new friend. After the soup incident, the participants from the Eastern Palace were moved to the western part of the castle. Now the ladies were constantly confused about which side each one's room was on. But it was only a matter of time before they got used to the innovation. One thing was certain. The contenders had a special respect for Madame Cindy. They constantly helped carry this lady's things and even seated Madame in the best place on the chair so that the lady would not get her luxurious dress dirty. Other contenders constantly brought her tea and behaved as if they were communicating with the already acting Empress. The main character of this story still did not understand how she should behave if Cindy was Mrs. Diana. There were several options. The first, to pretend that Ariana recognized her, to reveal herself and tell about her goal, but the woman would hate the girl for this. Option 2, pretend not to recognize her, interfere with Mrs. Diana while pretending that Ariana does not know who she is. This option is no different from the previous one. But the third option is an observer from the side, pretending that the other contender did not recognize her. And what to do in the end? The girl did not understand at all. As for the third option, if Ari didn't reveal Cindy's true identity, then Ms. Diana, at the very least, wouldn't hate the other girl, which was already a pretty good way out of the whole situation. But there was one but. In that case, the question would arise. Why did Ariana decide to descend into the human world and take part in this bet? Several days had passed since Cindy had introduced herself as Lady Diana, but Ariana still hadn't decided what to do. As a result, the girl just walked past each time without even greeting the supposed Empress. She was so engrossed in looking at the potential heir to the throne that when she was walking, she accidentally met her other rival. That girl had a lot of books in her hands, which were scattered when the lady collided with each other. So Ariana immediately began to help the lady collect all these stories. The lady even decided to help this miss carry all her things to her new room. Then Ariana noticed that most of the girl's things were books. They were quite heavy, so the rival was surprised why the contender carried them herself. Oddly enough, Ariana's new acquaintance was very careful, just standing and watching. At the same time, the contender decided to thank her rival because she had brought these books. But before leaving, Ariana wanted to ask the name of a familiar person. It turned out that this girl's name was Gerta. Besides, specifically from this contender for the role of Empress of the Kingdom, the main character felt an inexplicable, unpleasant feeling. As if this girl was eating herself up for another, or simply was a bad person. When Ariana was about to leave, the lady even advised the guest of her room not to approach the strong, which sounded extremely aggressive and unpleasant. As soon as the heroine left the room, she seriously thought about the words of her rival. If Gerta is from the Eastern Palace, then we can safely assume that she knows something about Cindy, and this, in turn, can further play into the hands of both Ari and the other participants in this bet. But does this prove that Cindy is the real Mrs. Diana? Or did she just want to throw the guest out of the room? If not, then why did the girl say that at all? Only perhaps she wants Ariana to stay away from the Empress? Or maybe Cindy really is dangerous. Among the crowd that day, Ariana luckily met her friend, the leader of the Knights of the Kingdom, Carl. As it turned out, the Knights were helping other girls with the transportation of heavy luggage. The guy instantly recognized his friend, but his reaction was unusual. At first, he caught her gaze, making eye contact with her. But at some point, he simply turned away and ignored her, as if nothing had happened, which made Ari surprised. For reasons that are completely unclear, Carl began to avoid contact with his sister's best friend again. He seemed to be deliberately trying to distance himself without explaining the reason. Then the heroine decided to go to the main hall. As expected, after the unification of the palaces, it became more lively here. And indeed, there were too many girls. Miss didn't even know who was who among the contenders. The other rivals were also happy that it became so crowded and lively here. After all, the atmosphere in the castle was terrible after the poisoning incident, but now it is not so empty and sad. Perhaps today we will even be able to play card games with everyone. In turn, Miss Positive, a girl named Katie, was very happy to meet the other contenders. Katie even suggested charging up with positive energy and greeting new people. In fact, after listening carefully to her rival, Anna whispered in her friend's ear that it was indeed a good idea. Of course, Anna was not going to greet the other participants, especially if it was about Cindy. Although, on the other hand, why not take advantage of Katie's offer and learn more about the supposed Empress? This is a rare opportunity, and Anya is so active. Therefore, the girls really decided to go to the new social circle. Meanwhile, Katie had already suggested throwing a welcoming party in the garden. Besides, the girl was in a great mood and the weather was perfect for hanging out in the garden. The supposed Empress seemed to like the suggestion from another participant, but Cindy still slightly offended Katie by the fact that the Countess recommended abandoning the idea, since the flowering season had passed. The garden really did not look its best, and everything smelled of compost. Judging by the lady's words, it was clear that she knew very well what was going on in the castle. Moreover, the lady added that it was now the middle of the month and she felt tired, so she would like to rest a little, taking a short break from such walks. But at that moment, Ariana already doubted her guesses about whether the Lady Diana was real. After all, how could this girl know that it was the middle of the month if Cindy was not a witch? At that moment, even the suspect herself noticed a strange expression on Ari's face. Just then, the conversation turned to her friend, Anna, as well. It's just a pity that Anna wasn't around now. As soon as the girl was introduced, Cindy promised to remember Ari's name and smiled sweetly. At that moment, the main character of this story was so embarrassed that she blushed, because the real Mrs. Diana called her by name. And if she really was that same Diana, then it was a great honor for Ari. Even the other girls noticed how happy the girl was that Mrs. Cindy kindly chatted with her. Well, then there was one brave girl from the crowd. It must be nice to have straw for brains. It must be nice to be a fool, Rosalind said with a grin, looking at her rivals. The girl immediately began to point out that these people had no pride at all. She saw absolutely no point in continuing to make mistakes, finding herself in the same room with the supposed Empress. Or rather, the lady simply did not see the point in this, and she herself pointed out that the other contenders did not even think about it, as if they had no brains. However, the participants were not going to silently listen to the useless opinion of an incomprehensible girl. This was really too much for them. Jolie decided to speak out for those who did not agree with her rival's opinion. Who is this contender who allows herself to speak like that? Is she Rosalind? She thinks that Her Majesty will leave her alone after such statements. But Rosalind was indeed a rather impudent lady, so she directly continued to point out how the other participants were following her lead and standing up for Her Majesty. But even at that, Miss demonstratively asked the others why they had decided that Cindy was Mrs. Diana. There was no evidence as such. Even if she was the real Empress, what good would it do to curry favor with this witch? Who was it that got them into this situation? Rosalina openly believed that Diana, who the other ladies clung to so much, wouldn't even blink an eye if the girls died. So many girls had died already, and this lady was as calm as a boa constrictor. Rosalind continued to point out that the fawning of other candidates would not change anything. At this point, the girl had so infuriated another young lady that Jolie simply walked up to her and hit the impudent woman in the face with all her might. Miss didn't want anyone to be able to say something like that about the Empress. But it seemed that the madam who had struck had attacked the wrong one. There was no need to show off her superiority here. All the participants were thinking the same thing anyway. Rosalind subconsciously understood that everyone was equally tired of this. However, even at this point, Cindy explained to Rosalind that she shouldn't get cocky and pretend that this girl knows everything. At that moment, whoever Cindy was, a real mistress or a girl masquerading as one, she did the right thing first of all. She didn't infuriate the conflict, but simply calmly asked the aristocrat not to be smart anymore. A witch can be as generous as a spring breeze, or she can bring down her wrath like a winter blizzard. Mistress Cindy, however, did not want to listen to the other participants' arguments about her candidacy, so she simply decided to leave the main hall after expressing her opinion. After Cindy left, the tension remained for several minutes. The silence was louder than any scream. Almost every resident of the mansion still did not fully understand what had happened. The participants gathered in the living room were stunned by what had happened. And only Ariana felt quite good and cheerful. The girl could not help but admire this whole spectacle. Ariana remembered how last time one of the girls set up another lady. It turns out that there are many here who do not watch their language, and today this was finally confirmed. But even so, the heroine tried not to despair. and really considered this a damn interesting spectacle. In fact, most of the girls were already on the verge of a nervous breakdown. One of the candidates even started crying after the supposed mistress left because she wanted the best for this woman. Although, at the same time, the candidate herself started the mess first. Jolie could be understood because she was really just tired of being here. All these showdowns with rivals are really exhausting, especially when it happens every day. Anna, looking at Miss, even wanted to pity the beauty. She offered her handkerchief so that the girl could wipe away her tears. Rosaline was really too harsh in her statements today. Besides, Jolie simply can't stand listening to such things because she really likes Cindy. But at that moment, instead of listening to the conversations of other participants, Ariana paid attention to how active her friend was today. This was extremely unusual for the modest and quiet Anna. So why was the lady behaving like this today? Anna continued to console Jolie, expressing her admiration for the fact that many other participants from the Eastern Palace, like the injured young lady herself, consider Cindy an empress. In order to find out the true reason why the participating ladies bet on Cindy, the modest girl decided to sit closer to Jolie and directly inadvertently find out personally. As it turned out, there had been a rumor going around the palace before that His Majesty had a secret relationship with one of the participants. They were even seen in the mansion's garden several times, and later on the walking paths. It was said that someone even hugged His Majesty in the garden. "I didn't know anyone saw us," Cindy whispered to one of the ladies one day. After the unusual gossip, everything seemed to turn upside down. The news spread throughout the mansion among the 100 participants. At this time, Ariana, as soon as she heard even the slightest news about secret meetings with His Majesty, immediately began to think seriously. Besides, Jolie continued to say that after what happened, many people turned their attention to Cindy's rival. Of course, there were those who didn't like her. One of them was Fox. One day, the lady publicly insulted Cindy. Jolie wasn't sure, but it seemed that Cindy said something about Fox's past that day. Jolie even remembered those very words of the competitor who suspiciously resembled the real Mrs. "If you don't want to be humiliated again, don't dare say nasty things about the great creature," Cindy said that day. The next morning, Fox felt an inexplicable sharp pain and refused to participate in the Imperial Bet. Although this contender seemed to everyone to be quite an ambitious girl, no one could even think that she would refuse to participate in such a tournament, since the lady was considered one of the strongest present here. Since then, Cindy has been openly called the Empress. Those participants who knew Mrs. Diana said that they really do look alike. Some even think that Cindy looks more like the Empress than Lola, but Lola was the first contestant to be killed. She was the same girl who died tragically in the tower when she went on a secret date with His Majesty in the very first weeks of the competition. At first, many supported Lola. Jolie said that it was all because Lola was genuinely kind. But there was something Ariana definitely didn't want to believe. Overall, it all sounded too strange. Something about these candidates definitely bothered the main character of this story. These two aristocrats are two suspicious individuals, and they also look quite similar to the real Empress. But something about them is off-putting. Lola. Cindy. Which of them is more like Mrs. Diana? How can we find out what the real Mrs. Witch was like? Perhaps what the ardent admirer of the real Empress Diana knew before was just a crumb. For some reason, Ariana thought that she would immediately recognize Mrs. Diana, since she was also a witch, like her. But did the girl really treat such an important issue too superficially? How confusing everything is now. That same day, the friends were walking together in the palace garden. Then Ariana decided to ask Anna the question that was tormenting her. First of all, the lady reminded that some time ago her friend had talked to Cindy about something that few people knew. Now the young lady asked her interlocutor to tell her what exactly they were talking about. To be honest, Anna didn't really want to report the details of the past, because everything was quite complicated. But the lady saw such a huge interest in her friend's eyes, so she simply couldn't help but share the secret, warning Ari in advance that this information should remain only between friends. No one could tell such a thing. A long time ago, Mrs. Diana became very angry. Unfortunately, the reason for such behavior was unknown to Anna. The young lady could only guess. Then the Empress tore up more than half of the books and documents from the Eastern Shelf. According to the girls' stories, that day Anna followed her brother to the castle and accidentally saw the heir to the throne. At that moment, Mrs. Diana looked very frightening. To be honest, Anna was even afraid to approach Miss. Now, the aristocrat thought that the Empress was trying to hide her sadness on that unfortunate day behind this anger. After listening carefully to her friend, the true admirer of Diana dared to suggest that it was quite possible that this could have happened because of the book. Further, according to the story of a friend, after this, Mrs. Diana restored everything with the help of magic. So few people know about this incident. Perhaps even His Majesty himself is in the dark. Now, the main character of this story really realized how strong Lady Diana's anger was. But what was the real reason for this anger? Why was Diana so out of her mind on that damn day? What could possibly upset a witch who had lived in this world for over 1,000 years? Was there anything in the human world that a witch couldn't do? How did Lady Diana even get to the human world and meet the Emperor? Why the hell did all this happen? There were so many questions like that in Ari's head at that moment, but there were just as few answers. After retelling the story, Anna decided to ask her friend her opinion on whether Cindy was really Mrs. Diana. In fact, it was quite a controversial issue. And even if only a little, Ariana really believed that such an option was quite possible. Then her friend pointed out that Ariana had come to the palace to meet with Madame Diana, and so she suggested telling Cindy everything. The girls really don't know much yet, but it can be fixed. The character understood that it was too early to draw a conclusion, so it was worth waiting a little longer. Then her friend promised to find out if Cindy was Mrs. Diana. At that moment, the interlocutor was still surprised by such a manifestation of her old best friend. Something strange is happening to Anna now. Lately, Anya has become too active, which cannot but arouse suspicion. It seems that something was rushing her. Even if Anna said so, her friend simply could not put everything on her shoulders. The heroine did not know what would happen if Cindy really refused to be Mrs. Diana. That is, it would be easier for the witch to find out. That's why Miss decided to act. At night, she went to the room of the supposed mistress. If we put aside the question of revealing Aries' goals for now, it would not be superfluous to make sure that Cindy is Mistress Diana. With all her courage, the lady still worried before entering the room, although she just had to knock on the door and then everything would go in its own order. Before Ariana knocked on the door, a girl's voice from the darkness distracted her. The unknown girl asked the guest who was currently near Cindy's room. As it turned out, it was Gerta who was standing in the hallway, asking Ari what she was doing there. In addition, the girl decided to clarify whether the other participant knew whose room this was. Ariana decided to directly admit that she simply could not fall asleep and wanted to talk to someone, which is why she came here. But Gerta considered the girl's decision too strange. Madame advised that if Ariana wanted to get closer to Cindy, it would be better for her not to do so. After which, the girl turned around and was about to go on her way, without really explaining her statement. At that moment, the heroine realized that she simply could not leave her warning without further explanation, so she grabbed Gerta's hand to stop her. Ari pointed out that if she wanted to warn about something, then she needed to tell the reasons. If Cindy was the real Diana, then Ariana saw nothing wrong with contact with her. Then the girl asked if there was another reason why she shouldn't do it. In order not to talk about all the dirty things inside the castle, Gerta suggested taking a little walk outside. In just a few minutes, the girls were walking around the outside of the palace. Gerta began her story from the moment that Ariana was from the western part of the mansion, so perhaps she was short of all the details. The first thing the interlocutor reminded us about was Lola, the first participant who was killed before the life competition began. It turned out that Gerta really liked this contender. At the very least, this girl was a lively and bright personality, and her death shocked everyone. Gerta could not forget how Lola made her admire her strength. The better admitted that although she was not Madame Diana, she was the real one. This person was indeed the most suitable for the role of Empress. At least among those who were currently taking part in this competition, she was the best candidate in Madame's opinion. Lola combined hostile elegance and generosity. She was kind, but at the same time impatient with mistreatment. She was respected by everyone in the Eastern Palace. Her presence was always like a ray of light in the dark events. Lola also remained true to her principles, unlike the same Cindy. The contestants from the Western Palace probably don't know this, but when they first arrived here, it was Lola who calmed the chosen ones from the Eastern Palace who were in their own panic. She actually helped a lot. comforting everyone when the fear of the unknown overwhelmed the palace. And while Lola was alive, Cindy sat quietly on the sidelines, hiding her true cowardice. The modest woman did not show herself in public, preferring to remain unnoticed. However, when no one saw, she still approached Lola, trying to find a way to quietly get rid of her competitor in order to take her place. That night, Gerta confessed that she had seen the ladies meeting in deserted places several times and constantly arguing about something. One way or another, Gerta had seen everything. Cindy was definitely in the tower that day. Ariana clearly didn't expect to hear such a statement. Now the whole puzzle came together in an instant. It was Cindy who went to that very forbidden tower on the day of Lola's murder, and it simply couldn't be a coincidence. It was not hard to guess that this impudent girl, Cindy, had mercilessly killed the first contender for the post of Empress Diana, and Gerta was sure of it. Unfortunately, the witness was unable to tell everything she wanted because the girls were distracted by the Knight Carl. The man explained to them that it was too late to walk in the middle of the night, and it was also dangerous. He ordered the ladies to return to their rooms and even decided to accompany them. Besides, it was still chilly outside. The lady could easily be understood. She almost found out the reason why Cindy killed Lola. The participant was going to reveal the secret, and Carl simply interfered and ruined everything. That whole walk with the young lady was very important for the miss, but now the efforts to get closer to the girl seemed to be irretrievably lost. Besides, the girl was angry not only because of this, but also because the knight had ignored her for days. And now, when the moment had come when the heroine could at least find out something, he intervened and interrupted her conversation. This added frustration to the already tense situation. But the man was persistent in explaining his childish behavior. He immediately explained to his interlocutor that in the future it would be better if he and Ari pretended to be strangers in the presence of other participants. Carl knelt down right in front of the lady to show all his regret about this, and to set the lady up for the fact that he was absolutely serious. The head of the Knights explained that Ariana still stood out, and if the other participants saw her as a threat, then no one would benefit from it. On the contrary, then the girl herself would drive herself into a dangerous situation. Besides, the guy knew that if something happened to the lady, Anya would be very upset. Well, the heroine also did not want to fly out of the competition, so she understood and accepted the position of her recent acquaintance. It was really reasonable, but at the same time, for some reason, Ari was still irritated by this whole situation, after which the guy decided to switch attention to how his friend announced that Cindy killed Lola. There was no one around now, so the guys could not pretend to be strangers and calmly talk about it. But the girl was so offended by the knight that she continued to maintain the image that they did not know each other. And yet, despite her irritation, after some strong persuasion from the guy, Ariana finally agreed to discuss with him what she had heard from Gerta earlier. The lady, not hiding her irritation, also added that she could have learned the whole real story if the knight had not spoiled their walk. Now she could only guess what had really happened between the two rivals on that ominous night. But now Carl felt that something still bothered him. First of all, the man did not understand how Lady Gerta could have clearly understood that the girl was Cindy. This moment really remained just a mystery now. That night, something strange was also happening in the main palace. Morris heard strange screams and moans coming straight from his lordship's bedroom. The Prime Minister did not keep him waiting, and in a few minutes gathered all the guards in order to immediately proceed to the Khan's private room. When the entire brigade entered his chambers, they saw a very unpleasant picture. The Emperor was standing with a bloody knife, and on the floor was a corpse of some man. But this was not the first case. Morris guessed in a second that the hired killers had begun to conquer their palace again. Afterwards, the chief ordered the guards to get rid of the body. This was all another message from the supporters of the old empire, trying to regain their lost positions. It seemed that the number of attempts on the emperor's power had increased since the empress's place had become empty. Now the emperor's every move was under fire, and there seemed to be danger in the air. Apparently, the treacherous aristocrats from the great nobility still did not realize the seriousness of the situation and continued their vile games. They did not deserve pity, and certainly not an easy death. Therefore, the emperor ordered to identify everyone involved in this and eliminate everyone without exception immediately. Morris then went on to say that Mrs. Diana was due to return, and that was the reason he had decided to find out what the emperor thought about Cindy. The assistant knew that the emperor's decision could affect the entire future, and so he was ready to act. To be honest, the young man was not at all sure of the truth of the words from this girl. That is why the guy said that he needed to see the lady at least once more. Something about her did not give the young man peace. By the way, Khan also ordered to fulfill a special request regarding Anna. Only after that, Morris left the guest chambers of the master. Looking at the bloodstains on his shirt that evening, Han remembered an incident that happened several years ago. It was the funeral of Countess Wen. People around were crying for the old lady. Friends even thought that the ruling family was cursed. Relatives continued to die one after another for several years. This is already the fifth case. As soon as the guests of the event noticed Khan, their mood instantly changed. The melancholy that had recently been in the air seemed to evaporate, and everything around sparkled with new colors. The aristocrats simply could not tear their eyes away from the beauty of the young emperor, comparing the young man to an angel fallen from heaven. After the funeral of the elderly countess, the 16th prince, Duke Wen, decided to return to the carriage with his already familiar lady. There sat the same Lady Diana, whom Han had met a couple of years ago on a random hunt. Upon returning that day, the girl immediately asked her friend how the funeral went. A peer expressed her opinion that people here were rather ineffective. They do not live for 100 years, and every time someone dies, they hold a funeral. For a girl from a family of witches, such customs were simply incomprehensible and unusual. If Diana had known that they would pull like this every time, she would have dealt with them all at once. But the interlocutor explained that the people had done nothing wrong during their entire career, so there was no reason to eliminate them prematurely. The guy didn't even think that he would ever be taken seriously as a threat and a potential contender for the throne. Then the witch suggested that Khan simply take the throne himself. This was the first risky but obvious step that opened up horizons for the lovers. And this proposal concealed not only a political move, but also the beginning of a serious romantic relationship with Mrs. Diana. There is no one in the Empire who does not know the story of Duke Wen. Everyone remembers how the youngest prince, who had an angelic appearance, became the concubine of Duchess Wen. This story always attracted attention, and the Count himself remained at the center of all conversations and rumors. He inherited not only the richest lands, but also a fortune after the mysterious death of an elderly woman. And then came the scandalous rumors associated with the beautiful girl who was always by the Duke's side. Whatever the rumors, Lady Diana noticed that Khan's subjects were still satisfied with his rule. They felt confident and stable, not paying attention to empty talk. Diana saw how it spread calmly throughout the nation. It turned out that after the young man became the Duke of Wen, the endless wars between nobles came to naught. Such rumors are a way to have fun, which is why everyone is so happy. But the Khan himself did not care at all and was not interested in other people's opinions. The guy just wanted to live peacefully with Diana, the love of his life. Now that he was in a safe position, he no longer had to be greedy. But who knew what the guy should have done? Too many eyes were watching him anyway. So Diana doubted the safety of her partner's position. Anyway, that day Diana promised to take care of everything. They played mines, and once again, Khan lost. The magnificent Diana explained to the guy every time that he needed to be more aggressive, and this applied not only to the board game. However, is there anything more effective in managing lands than war? It can be used to obtain slaves and resources, sell weapons and other goods at a high price, and silence undesirable opponents. This was the opinion of an experienced commander, the 7th prince of the local empire. Duke Leonardo, sipping a heady drink in his mansion, received news from his humble servant. The spontaneous news was that 9 royal mercenaries had gone missing. Even such an experienced commander, it was still unclear where the young man got such a strong defense. But there was no time to wonder about Khan's guards. Now it was necessary to act quickly, before Duke Wen, who possessed the largest territory and wealth, stopped fighting the nobles for power, and did not focus on increasing his power. Leonardo knew very well that if the mercenaries, despite their training and experience, failed to cope with the task, then they can resort to other, more sophisticated tactics. The backup plan was carefully thought out in advance. In the king's head, there were always several possible strategies that the commander could use in any circumstances. The next day, the crown prince was studying the list of yet another document. The deputy explained that the emperor, prince, minister, and nobles had appointed the 16th Prince Han, Duke Wen, as the heir to the throne. This was truly shocking. Unexpected news for the young ruler. That wasn't the end of the news for the day. It seemed like the events unfolding before the boy's eyes couldn't stop. A guard standing nearby added that the boy had received a letter from Duke Leonardo himself. At that moment, the boy felt excitement begin to bubble up in his chest. What was going to happen to him now? The letter addressed the Khan, a smart fellow, about the fact that the beautiful speeches of the outside nobility were nonsense. Therefore, the seventh prince went straight to the point and explained that the princes and most of the aristocrats were unhappy that the lands of Wen ended up in the hands of a boy. Although Leonardo was sure that the young man least of all wanted a war, he was sick of his defeat. Based on this, the man had a counter-proposal. If Han gave up his position as Duke Wen, then the expert would give him the throne. If the boy remained silent and became an obedient head emperor, then he would keep his position and the other kingdom would not touch him. Of course, the Khan could have refused, showing his independence. But in such a situation, no agreement would not have been perceived as simply a refusal to make a deal. It would have been a gesture equal to a declaration of war on all noble families, which was extremely dangerous. And that is why the current prince hoped that the boy would nevertheless make the right choice. After reading it, there was no trace of doubt left on the guy's face. He immediately asked for the opinion of his closest person, Diana. The girl, having carefully analyzed every word in the letter, directly pointed out that for a man with his tail between his legs, Leonardo was too arrogant. Whether the guy would really give up the throne, one cannot give open guarantees. Although Diana remembered that her boyfriend wanted to stay. In addition, people had their eye on the lands, but at the same time it would be difficult to get close to Khan, so the aristocrats would now actively try to take advantageous positions. To calm the young man down, the girl took him away, since a simple guy doesn't need to rack his brains like that. She advised him to choose only what his heart tells him, be it the position of Duke Wen or the imperial throne. The miss promised that as long as she was around, Han would always be safe. Then the witch comfortingly pulled the young man to her, and their lips merged in a tender kiss. That night, the passion of the young grew into something more. Khan loved his other half very much, but he was also very worried about the fact that his life was not eternal, unlike Diana. The guy was a simple mortal man who fell in love with an eternally living witch, but it was too early to think about it. Until then, Diana had promised to always stay close to her beloved and never leave him. After all, the lovers could easily overcome all difficulties together, only by controlling the power of their love. The next day, a meeting was to be held to decide the issue of succession to the throne. During the negotiations, the young pretender to the post of emperor planned to announce his decision to members of the ruling family and aristocrats. The hereditary heir initially decided to invite his daughter-in-law with him. After a couple of hours, filled with tension and anticipation at the same time, the carriage with the guests arrived in the capital. Upon arrival, the guys were greeted warmly by the butler of the mansion and invited to the living rooms of the mansion. All the other guests, who had arrived even earlier, were already animatedly discussing the upcoming event and awaiting the visit of Duke Wen. But who knew that at that very moment a disaster would happen? Several excited servants with horror in their eyes hurried to report to the visiting guy that a terrible attack had occurred on the Duke of Wen's estate. Now the mighty building had almost fallen. Flames raged around, and it all seemed like a nightmare that could not be stopped. However, as it soon became known, this entire meeting, with its seemingly peaceful atmosphere, was in fact intended solely to obscure the true goals and prepare the ground for a further planned attack. The first thing Khan did was apologize to the lady, since now the girl should have returned to the estate. But Diana, of course, did not even think about leaving her lover here alone. However, the gentleman still tried to explain to the lady that the impudent people wanted his lands. If Khan lost the estate, the guy would have no leverage. The young man assured that those who were attacking the throne would do nothing to him, at least until they had completely captured the territory. Therefore, the young lovers still had to say goodbye. Not for long, but part with each other. Leaving, Khan promised to return before the end of the meeting and only then let go of his companion's hand. Meanwhile, the fighters were doing their best to provoke fire so that every centimeter of the palace was drowning in flames. "Set it on fire! Hurry up and seize the estate!" came from the guard commanders. In addition, the defense of the estate was surprisingly weak. This only played into the attackers' hands. As soon as they finished occupying, they could contact the high nobility. But how quickly their plan began to crumble. In a second, one commander noticed the image of an unknown lady on the roof of a burning house. But this girl was not afraid of fire at all and calmly stayed at the height. Then the lady went down to deal with the warriors. No one even had time to imagine how quickly one woman would exterminate everyone. That's when people really believed in the existence of magical creatures like witches. After that, the staff realized that they had to report the horror that had happened to the palace. Besides, if the crowd had known the outcome in advance, they wouldn't have behaved so arrogantly. But what can you do? It already happened. With the final blow, the powerful girl pierced the body of the last survivor. Unfortunately, dealing with the opponents took longer than the witch expected. Therefore, the heroine took the necessary steps to inform the prince as soon as possible that the estate had been recaptured. The beauty knew that the meeting should not have ended yet. Meanwhile, the reprisal began directly with the pretender to the post of His Majesty. The guy did not even understand how to understand the fact that in a second, all the guards pointed their swords towards the guest. They told him that the young man would be executed for treason. Of course, the imperial youth had never done anything like that in his memory. His brother, an unpleasant man who held the title of the 7th Prince of the Kingdom, had prepared himself enough to disgrace the young man. The man said that some time ago he had received news about the former Wen estate, that Han had raised an army on his lands without the permission of the emperor and without declaring war on other lands. Out loud, Will began to voice his guess about what the young man was planning to do while the supreme forces were in the castle. Now his brother had set such a trap for the boy that it seemed Khan would have nowhere to run. Duke Wen was in real danger at the moment. In this tense atmosphere, the young man recalled his last conversation with his companion. Then, in the carriage, he told her that he was going to give up the throne because it would force the witch to live in the castle. The Khan did not want his beloved wife to live in captivity. His companion did not really share the prince's decision because he had already seen the letter. Other aristocrats would simply not sit idly by. However, the gentleman insistently pointed out that he had already made a decision. The guy believed that at least from time to time he too should protect his beloved. Now the powers of a powerful witch have once again saved a simple mortal guy from a difficult situation. But it turned out that the lady miscalculated her energy just a little, and so, while destroying the enemies of the potential heir, she accidentally touched the count's body. However, even this was not the limit. Diana was not going to simply despair. The lady gathered her strength and with all her streams of thoughts began to try to revive the gentleman. The stream of light coming straight from the castle was so bright that it literally blinded the residents located several kilometers from the epicenter. People watched this spectacle from the side, barely holding back their terrifying and alluring delight from the explosion. This phenomenon was so dangerous that ordinary locals had to lie down on the ground to avoid being hurt by the explosion. Looking at the unforgettable picture, people even began to believe in magic. Then, even the skeptical Leonardo personally became convinced that witches were real after all. Moreover, who would have thought that there was a witch in Khan's entourage? It was necessary to get out of here as soon as possible if you wanted to survive. In 1,000 years, Lady Diana had never experienced such pain as now. And yet, the girl now had absolutely no idea what to do. The situation was so difficult that it seemed as if there was no solution at all. Deep down, the hereditary witch realized that she simply could not forget her betrothed. Not only could she not, the girl did not plan to erase the image of her other half from her memory. But even at the shelter, only one question arose. Should a witch live with this pain forever? The answer was definitely no. No. No, and only no. Now the Miss finally promised herself never to let go of the man she loves more than anyone else in this world, no matter what happens, no matter what danger foreshadows. The witch will always be next to her man. After a few hours, the Emperor was finally able to open his eyes. When he looked around, he realized that he was in a familiar room. It was the bedroom of the Wen mansion, and Diana was sitting on a chair next to him. The lady decided to say first that they were now in the imperial palace and the guy should rest a little more. At the same time, the young lady calmed the crown prince. The lady pointed out that now he could breathe a sigh of relief, since this entire palace officially belonged to the newlyweds. Or rather, the mansion was now ruled by His Majesty, the young but promising new emperor, Mr. Hanwen. The witch said that she had killed everyone who was in the castle, and those who had attacked someone else's estate. Despite the whole unclear situation, the guy was now more concerned not with the new huge territories under his control, but only with why he was alive. Khan was not a fool to understand how at that moment he died from a direct blow of a sharp sword, right into the depths of the heart. Seeing the surprise of her boyfriend who had just woken up, the girl noted out loud how much the magical explosion had scared him. Then the lady advised Khan to sleep a little longer, and then, when he woke up, promised that everything would be fine. However, the guy never learned something by the will of the savior. You wouldn't wish even your enemy to experience what Diana experienced, saving her most beloved person in this world and putting her magical health at great risk. Now, in the area of the girl's heart, a huge empty hole has formed forever. Back to the present. One day, while the castle atmosphere was still tense and almost all the inhabitants of the palace were on edge, Cindy decided to invite the other contestants to take a walk around the castle grounds to unwind. The girls went with the lady to the garden. Lady Katie and a couple of other contestants were invited to the walk that day. The first thing the potential countess, the supposed Miss Diana, did was to ostentatiously thank Katie in front of all the ladies simply for her presence today. The girl confessed that she believed that the walk became more pleasant if they walked together with such a bright and cheerful person as the optimistic applicant. Cindy also added that she wanted to befriend the betters from the Western Palace. The lady said this primarily because she wanted to get help from Katie. It was as if she wanted to take advantage of the kind girl's kindness, although she tried in every way not to openly show her true nature as a villainess. The miss herself, of course, agreed to help without hesitation. The girl knew that there were plenty of problems there, but that was the order of things. True, the lady warned in advance that it was better to avoid the company of a participant named Selena. And if we discuss yesterday's conflict, the resident of the palace, Rosalina, behaved rather stupidly. She surprised everyone yesterday, although she was usually quiet and didn't talk to anyone much, and wasn't friends with anyone. But just the day before, the girl spoke without fear in her eyes. Who would have thought that someone would say something like that to the Empress, and that this person would be the modest Rosalind? It wouldn't take long for her to suffer. At one point, one girl noticed a participant nearby. It was Ari. Khan's future wife immediately decided to ask the talkative girl if the princess knew the participant passing by. The contender immediately identified her acquaintance by her dress and reported her name to the countess, explaining that this resident of the palace had been sitting opposite at breakfast. Next, the heroine decided to briefly characterize Ari. According to Katie, Ariana is a unique madam. Sometimes she can behave naively or even childishly, and sometimes even eccentrically. She is the complete opposite of Anna, who usually goes with her friend, another contender for the Emperor's chosen one. It seemed as if Cindy was waiting for the conversation to turn to another participant, Anna. As soon as the girl heard this name, she immediately asked the lady to tell her about this girl in all details. Cindy was clearly not who she claimed to be, and she was also planning something insidious. That afternoon, Rosaline continued to be bullied by the contestants while walking around the palace grounds. The contestants were not going to calm down after the incident with the countess. This time, the young lady got hit in the face with a heavy book when someone threw a textbook at the innocent girl. Just then, her neighbor, the good-natured Anna, approached the lady. Miss noticed the behavior of other ladies towards the lady, and even offered a handkerchief for the poor girl to apply the cloth to the place of the blow. The embittered Rosalind only decided to ask aggressively where her monkey had gone, who always ran after Anna. It was about her friend, Ari. The impudent girl even dared to suggest that the girl was in trouble once again. But what about Rosalind herself? Who would have thought that a plain girl would criticize ordinary, uninvolved participants in a place where wrestling is not prohibited? It was foolish of this lady to think that anyone could be safe here, as Anna pointed out to her opponent in plain text. Such a bold answer from a modest woman still touched the competitor at that moment. It became evident from how Rosalind drew attention to the fact that Anna, although she looked like a flower grown in a greenhouse, was quite sharp-tongued. But at least the lady had no reason to show her thorns in front of Ari's friend. Most likely, that's only because everyone thinks so. And yet, there was something that was most curious to Anna. That day, the aristocrat asked her interlocutor directly why Rosalind was staying in the castle after her harsh remarks about the other participants. Anna was obviously right. Everyone who was in their right mind had already abandoned the competition. Only those who wanted to be in the castle remained here. But what about Rosalind? What does this misunderstood miss really want? Just one such statement about excessive courage but also stupidity at the same time, this lady was simply torn apart by aggression from within. Anna had been working so long to be able to calmly point out the lady's incomprehensible behavior. To point out her hostility toward Mrs. Diana. No, not even toward her. First of all, the girl has an unfounded hostility towards His Majesty. Okay, Cindy. No one has yet confirmed whether this woman is actually a real lady. But Rosalind's strange attitude towards the young Emperor Wen can't be justified. To be honest, Anna had been watching this interlocutor since the day of their first meeting. All women looked at His Majesty, but not with the same look as Rosalind. Could it be that the lady was the embodiment of what the chosen one was thinking about? After what happened, the rival even dared to suggest that Anna would decide to eliminate her by any means. But the aristocrat somehow did not think that she should do something like that. In addition, Anya even wanted to leave the lady alone, because other participants would get to her anyway, and until the end of her stay in this house of Rosalind, they would harass the lady. On the contrary, Anna wanted to help the poor fellow, no matter how strange it might sound. For some reason, the young lady even thought that they were similar. That is why Anna, holding out her hand to her interlocutor, offered a mutually beneficial deal. But Rosaline had no intention of listening to the miss. On the contrary, she distanced herself from her help, indicating that she was not a hypocrite. After that, the not-so-pleasant dialogue came to an end. Then Anna decided to find her friend, and fortunately, the lady managed to do it quickly. Then the ladies gathered to rest together, so after the walk, they went back to the palace. That evening, the girls in the western part of the palace were all going to spend time together usefully. This time, the chosen ones decided to take a knitting lesson from one of the craftswomen. The seamstress got into this bet anyway. Why not teach the talent to other participants? Although knitting was really hard for Ariana, the girl was constantly pricking her fingers with knitting needles and even tangling the threads. Yes, Miss was clearly born without talent for needlework. And in general, if not for strangers, the witch would have been able to cast a spell and would have finished in an instant. But somehow a calm atmosphere reigned among the participants. While the lady was at the master class in this circle, the heroine accidentally overheard the candidates whispering about His Majesty secretly meeting with Cindy again. The lady said that Prime Minister Morris personally handed over the invitation for the participant. Everyone must have already decided that Cindy was Diana. Although it wasn't illogical, anyone in their place would have been sure of the truth of the candidate's status.